So I mean, you know, I like I say, I haven't read the book in any kind of detail.
Actually, that may be this point about Joyce and Finnegans Wake and Frank. That might be something I might lead into with the Jari thing, because that's where I'm an expert on.
Yeah.
I was McLuhan's archivist, so I know the Joycean background.
Okay, let me reintroduce. Okay, you guys ready?
Yeah.
Need to go to the bathroom or anything?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. This is Contemporary Communications Conference. My name is Jerry Fielka. We welcome back to Part 2, Nigey Lennon, the author of the book Being Frank, My Time with Frank Zappa, and joining us is Bob Dobbs, author of the book Phatic Communion with Bob Dobbs.
Okay, taking this theme of the dog energy, do you think Frank was aware of his dog energy, or that was so much what Gurdjieff would call your chief characteristic, and he wasn't aware of it? He just was lucky to be able to carry it out because he had the talent to create the environment to have perpetual motion, so to speak.
Yeah, I think so.
You don't think he was aware of his dog?
I think Frank was not. I mean, he was certainly capable of discernment psychologically, but he wasn't given to self-examination. So. Yeah,
now that's interesting. What he examined was, and you get into this section of the book where you're measuring the sock. He's manipulating his voice on you. He's massaging you with his voice, right? Yeah. Now, what did you do with the sock?
I've got it actually at home. It's in a frame.
You do?
Yeah, it's a little shrine that I have in the living room. Yeah.
Is it? Do you communicate to us what you did with the sock, or is it only implied?
I'm sorry. What was the question? I didn't.
Well, when you have that sexual encounter where he's testing the voice on you and he's getting you out of control.
Right.
What did you do with the sock? What was the sock then? Because you refer back to it through the book. Can you say that, or you don't want to?
Sure. The sock, well, it was symbolic, obviously. I mean, you have sex with somebody and,
He would be laying the sock on different parts?
He
does that. Doesn't he do that in Uncle Meat? He's like Don Preston, he's laying out little things.
Little objects, right, because he was talking there about fetishism, people who like to have sex with objects or whatever, and he was really fascinated. See, it's like your question earlier, did he, how much was he aware of his own, say, dog energy, whatever. I think Frank, to him, that object was such a metaphysical thing to him, because look what it symbolized. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a physical reality. You jump over the bridge, like you use an instrument to play music to get you into, who knows where in the universe. That sock was also...
That was his microscope.
There you go.
That was the scientist. Now this is
interesting. That's Dr. Zircon. It's this Dr. Zircon side of his personality.
Now just a little, go back to this, before we get into the science thing. Did you read Miles's articles in 1970 when they used to come out?
Absolutely.
He had the best... He was the one who started to notice the conceptual continuity too.
He did. He noticed Frank down there in the basement cranking out tapes and little pieces of things together, and
As a matter of fact, I read that really great Miles interview when I was in Seattle in the fall of '69, and he asked Frank, how much does the idea, capital letters, control or modulate the music? And Frank didn't really talk about it. He just went into the archetypes of art and Rubin and Jets and stuff. Yeah. I think actually I would say that gave me the idea of the conceptual continuity, that the idea... And I said, he didn't answer that. I want to know more about the idea. And I never could understand it. I even worked on it in this interview.
What did he say when you asked him?
Well, I kept working on it. He wouldn't admit. If you wanted to go at him as a great mind, he would go physical.
No.
He'd flip.
Exactly. You see, because he really, in a certain sense, as brilliant as he was kind of anti-intellectual.
That's right.
It was a Zen training, I think, because he went through a big Zen phase, and he didn't... I mean, when you started intellectualizing it, you lost it. That was the way he looked at it.
But at the same time, if you played... If you started to regard Frank as one of the guys in the physical, he would get snobbish and aloof. Yeah. So he'd flip back and forth. Yeah. Now I wonder how much.
He's perverse. That's all.
Yeah. No. Well, maybe it was. That's what I wondered. I was trying to pursue is that conscious.
Whatever Frank couldn't have was what he most wanted. If it was too easy to have, forget it. He didn't have any interest in it whatsoever. And that worked. That was a postulate that worked every time with him.
Isn't it the sign of a Capricorn? They're stubborn workers. You always want to have a task, right?
I always thought he was a Sagittarius.
You're right. It's December. He's right on the cusp.
21st. Yeah, I looked him up once in an ephemeris, and it was Sagittarius for a few more hours, and then it turned to Capricorn. Yeah. And Capricorn ascendant though.
Yeah. What is the characteristic of Sagittarius? Stubborn, I think.
Not stubborn so much as
dogged.
Not really. It's a mutable sign. It's fire sign. It's kind of looking for well, how do you put it in? It's adventure, really.
Really? It's
yeah.
adventurous.
It's an adventurous sign, the most, yeah, practically. Yeah.
Whereas Capricorn, do you know what Capricorn is?
More conservative.
So he had both then.
Well, yeah,
he was right on the cusp.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Okay, so what was we were just talking?
Well,
the sock.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So when I saw him lay out these things,
Mm-hmm.
I sort of thought he was satirizing people had those fetishes.
Mm-hmm.
You reveal he had those fetishes, or he consciously had them because he used them.
He would externalize them on other people.
Yeah,
but he had them. Sure, he
so
had them.
so he measured you with the sock.
Right.
Is the point?
Yeah.
Now, did you feel resistant in just saying that, or you hadn't thought of saying that point in the book?
I mean, I thought it was implied by the
yeah,
description.
maybe I didn't. Yeah,
Yeah. I didn't want to
get
get too kind of sleazy with some of the descriptions because then they would lose, I think, their kind of
Yeah.
their resonance as guideposts in this relationship, little markers and things.
Yeah, it was almost like Frank's, what might appear to be perverse, was just the laboratory technique.
Yeah.
It wasn't the main
Right.
point. He was studying.
Yeah.
And I just reread that this morning, and he actually was doing the Uncle Meat on you, studying,
Yeah.
sound
Right.
levels
Yeah,
on
right.
you. Oh, if we do this to you, we do
Right.
that with my voice like this. So he was really media massaging you.
Oh yeah.
With this
yeah.
thing.
He did that. He did that a lot. Yeah.
And that really is a model, a micro model of his whole approach to music,
It
right?
was. That was why I included it because I thought it was
Yeah.
just so. It was like so central to everything that he did in his modus operandi work-wise.
So
Yeah.
when he did that then, you wouldn't understand that. When did you understand that about
I
him?
got with Frank Z. I understood. I think virtually everything unconsciously.
Right, because you were able to
and
understand it.
It's funny because, and those were the things that attracted me the most to Frank. It was so unorthodox, just blasted the roof out, off of everything.
Well, you
that
actually
I
were
knew.
hijacked by a maniac,
Oh,
by an
yeah.
alien.
And it was terrific.
And little girls giggling.
Yeah,
And doing,
yeah. This is great. I had nothing to lose.
Yeah,
you see,
right.
At that
No,
point, if
You
look
really
at-
were. You were hijacked by an alien,
Yeah.
totally
Yeah,
unexpected.
yeah. Exactly.
And that's what's real mind blowing about the book. You get to tell everybody, "Hey, Frank was an alien
Definitely.
who's measuring me with a sock." That's pretty amazing.
It's because there's that question there too. It's like Dr. Zircon, what's the word for love in your universe? Because
Yeah.
I actually asked him that question. He just
Okay.
sort of gave me one of those looks, like Professor Poopmeister.
Okay, hold that thought
Yeah,
because just go
yeah.
back. There was the Miles thing
Mhm.
describes that he had the sign on his lab on
Mhm.
his thing, Dr. Zircon
Von's
in
lab
Happy
in Happy
Valley.
Valley. Yeah,
Now,
right.
I've mentioned Dr. Zircon to people, no one knew it. You're the first person who knew the name
Mhm, yeah.
and knew it at the right time.
Yeah.
And you don't say where. I just noticed. I don't think
Yeah.
you say where Dr. Zircon comes
Yeah,
from.
I know, because it's so much a part of my unconscious when I was writing it.
Yeah, you mean you would say you should have said it.
I should have put it somewhere. Yeah.
But yeah, that was.
But in a way, it's better because this way it's the character, and of course, we can get into where Zircon really came from.
Oh, where?
It's,
What's that?
Well, it's a little bit like Jack Kerouac and Dr. Sachs, same
Yeah.
kind of a character, this dark, shadowy character, things that kind of terrify you in a way, in ways of objectifying them and making them.
That's how he
work
explained
for
them to you?
No. This is what my observation, rather. Frank's father, as I'm sure you know, you seem to know quite a bit about
Yeah.
Frank.
Yeah.
His father was a scientist.
Yeah.
He worked in.
I know all about the
defense.
father. Yeah.
Yeah, Frank Senior. He was worked in.
Oh, that's that. Oh, Jerry, we remember when I showed you my archives. We had that article by Richie York in the Globe and Mail where Frank describes. This is in '69. He's describing the making of Uncle Meat, and it blew you away what he said. He said it's about a guy whose father is a government scientist.
Yeah.
And it's not in the Uncle Meat package, that theme.
Right.
But it's
right.
exactly what he was talking about his father,
Yeah.
his relationship with his father.
Right, and all of the stuff that horrified Frank, I think, when he was at a real impressionable age was, the fact that there were gas masks hanging in the hall at home.
He was like in a Nazi concentration camp or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
And I mean, who knows? I mean, a Freudian could have field day with Frank. I'm glad nobody has. But there's a lot of things I think with him. I mean, just at a really critical point in his development, emotionally, he was just subjected to horror, like Kafka. Kafka, I think, was one of Frank's favorite writers, and he'd read everything Kafka ever wrote. He didn't want to admit it to people, but he had. We had a lot.
And you read that when he was young, in high school, would you say?
Probably a little later. I'd say he's probably in his 20s.
Okay.
And for him, it explained a lot of things, because Kafka, I think, and Frank had something in common. They were both extremely capable of seeing things just extremely hyper-realistically.
Right.
Almost to the point where it looked like a hallucination.
Right.
And the horror of it is brought back crystal clear, just, in such a way that you feel it, but you transcend it. And
right. Now, how does Zircon relate to that? Is that
well,
his father?
Zircon was kind of, shadowy figure. I mean, maybe it started out being his dad coming home, from
Yeah.
work in a lab coat,
Yeah.
and his dad working with mustard gas,
Yeah. And poison and
poison
all that.
gas and DDT and all these weapons of death and destruction.
Which is in like when the mother's like 66, 65, there's a little ad, and he poses a question about poison gas, and you realize in retrospect that was a motif.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which goes back to his father.
And where you really see a connection is Prelude to the Afternoon of a Sexually Aroused Gas Mask. Here he's this teenage kid playing with his space helmet, the gas mask with a canister taken off, and who knows what the hose reminds him of. And
okay, so
you got a fertile field there.
So does Dr. Zircon become Uncle Meat?
Yeah.
As that scientist
sure.
guy?
Uncle Meat, who is seen in the, not really seen in the film, but he's a little bit like the omniscient God type narrator. You don't ever see him, but his hand is felt, all through the movie. And the little picture of him on the cover of the Grand Wazoo album, laboring in his secret lab, scratching his rash on his
with books that Frank was reading right then. Dave Waller, I think he was reading Rise and Fall of Third Reich right about when you were there.
The Arms of Krupp.
Yeah, he was reading those books that period.
I'm surprised that the Decameron Boccaccio wasn't there too, because I was reading that to him.
Because he had it in his library?
No, I had it.
You brought it.
And he loved it because it's like, that sort of lowbrow, highbrow Italian thing, which Frank got much more Italian as he got older, but he always was really Italian, and the humor in it he just thought was terrific. And then he also liked all of the references to the Black Plague as a sort of a force in people's lives.
In other words, you're telling me the first time when I suspected, I'm one of the few people who noticed when it first came out, 1348's on the cover of...
there you go.
Why? And that was, it's obviously the plague date.
The plague, So he never studied the plague. Diseases fascinated him for some reason.
And he does have a plague reference in one of the song titles in Uncle Meat. But why did the plague fascinate him?
That was the clap, I think, huh?
No, isn't it? It's something
about
the year of the
plague. But he wasn't talking about, I don't think he was talking about the Black Plague. I think he was talking about the clap.
Do you think that since Cal made I talked to Cal back in 71, he made the album, maybe he put the 1348 in.
He could have actually.
But had he talked to Frank, what was Frank's fascination with the plague?
Well, from what I could tell when I was reading the Decameron to him, he couldn't believe that. I mean, you live in modern times and they don't have the Black Plague anymore. And he said he had a horror of ancient history. He was fascinated by it, but horrified at the same time.
But he wasn't living there.
He was glad he wasn't, because I mean, let's face it. I mean, things that now can be cured with penicillin were killing people left and right. Life was a short, nasty, and Brutus and short kind of a thing. And the Black Plague, the numbers who died, and the fact that the Decameron, of course, is being about a few people who had enough money to kind of get the hell out of it and kind of look down at. Frank related, I think, to that vantage point that those people had. And what did they do? They went off and they played music and told stories. And for a while he was kicking around in his mind sort of, how can I apply this to a project? What's a modern plague? There was no AIDS or anything.
Did he say that to you?
It was just in kind of sketchy outline. His mind was kind of, the wheels were turning, And in a certain sense, it's kind of interesting. I find they're kind of ghastly parallels in Civilization Phase 3. But to what we were kind of thinking about back then, because...
But look at the interval. It fits his whole preoccupation with AIDS and ending his biography with a higher form of killing. That you're telling me where it came from.
Maybe, that could be the genesis of it. And he himself being ill and thinking about, in a sense, like...
The doctors failed to protect him, so to speak. He had a plague.
And see, it's like Dr. Zircon again, the good, the bad of science, There's a lot there.
Now the Uncle Meat Dr. Zircon is that when I read it back then in '69, I said, "Oh, that's Frank, the high culture guy infiltrating pop music." And he's describing, he got the little mothers, Reuben the Jets, and he put them out there, and he had an experiment. He was going to run for president, and all that stuff. The grandmothers and those people, they are wrestling. They kind of got used, they think, by Frank.
Yeah, they do feel.
But I would say they got used by the dark side of Frank, which is the Dr. Zircon, which he was like self-consciously admitting he had that agenda, but he also wasn't that agenda. He was a nice guy, and he helped musicians. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
So in Jungian terms, he was doing, that was the dark side that he said, you might think, you will eventually figure out that I have a dark side to me, so I'm actually talking to you about him already.
Yeah.
So the Uncle Meat in that.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we have to be a little careful, too. We're assuming Frank was super conscious, hyper-conscious of everything that he ever did.
Well, that's what, Frank was a puzzle. See,
I don't think anybody is. I mean, as bright and as brilliant and as talented as Frank was, he's still only a human being. And it took me years to accept that.
That he wasn't as bright as...
Well, no, not that he wasn't as bright, but that he's only a human being.
Right, but here's the thing. Is that Jerry and I have talked about this for years.
Fallible, in other words.
He's oh yeah, I don't mean he has a huge disservice. He wrecked a whole generation. You know what I mean? You know, from Bernstein's point of view. Someone told me that when he and Bernstein met in '67, Bernstein wouldn't talk to him. There was an animosity there.
I bet there was. Yeah.
And there was that may have been Frank's his
well,
don't go bug Bernstein for the rest of my life kind of thing.
Yeah, he wouldn't be able to look at himself in the mirror if he didn't do that. Yeah.
So and Bernstein represented the service and disservice of the other side. You know, but the thing about Frank is after that '88 interview, is I knew he was being ornery, a contrarian at a certain point.
Stubborn, yeah.
And you see what was amazing. I bring up the symbolists. I wasn't thinking of Jari, but Jari would be included. He knew nothing about those guys. No. You know, he didn't know any of that stuff.
The one thing that made me almost want to contact him was when that book was published. My book on Alfred Jarry.
In '85.
I wanted him to have a copy. In '84, I wanted him to have a copy. And I debated if I should just mail him one. I didn't do it. I tried to get hold of somebody that I had met in Switzerland through Frank, the guy who was in Zurich and used to put out a
Urban Guerder.
Urban Guerder, right. And I couldn't get hold of him. I'd lost track of him. He'd gone up in the mountains and was herding cattle and whatnot.
Yeah, you know what he did?
What happened to him?
I got in touch with him in, say, '75, '76.
Right, that was, because I knew him in '74 and '75, and '76.
Do you remember, did he tell, what happens, he put on a, did you ever get his Hot Rats magazine?
Yeah, I have a whole run of it, actually.
Okay, remember when?
I contributed to it, as a matter of fact.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have it.
Yeah.
Under your name?
Yeah. There's several things.
Geez, maybe that's why your name's familiar.
It could be,
I never knew why it was familiar.
Well, Urban told me a funny story. We never spoke directly. It was all by correspondence, which I thought was very surreal, you know. He had a standing invitation to go and stay there if I ever wanted to go, but I never made it there. But I'd done my European jaunt by that point. But he told me...
How did you hear about him?
Frank.
Oh, Frank told you about that, yeah. So you wrote to him and then...
So I wrote him, and, you know, he was very glad to write back because he liked to keep in touch with people who knew Frank. But he told me a hilarious story. He said the first time that he'd ever heard of me, Frank did a really surprising thing. He was talking about something totally random, and he pulled out his wallet, and there was a picture of me in there, and he held out the picture and just didn't say anything, just showed him to Urban, and that was the end of it. And Urban said, well, who's that? And somebody later told him, well, that's somebody named Nigey Lennon who used to play in the band.
And he doesn't know why Frank showed it at that point.
No, there was no explanation.
It was like a non-verbal communication.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
Yeah.
My problem.
So,
this is the enemy. The women are gaining.
Kill! Dr. Zircon on the way.
Well, that's a very good story.
It was strange. I mean, that alone was really an interesting way to kind of get to know Urban. And
so he saw an image of you, and then Frank got you to write him, and then you corresponded.
Right, and then I kind of contributed by... You know, he needed somebody here who kind of could keep tabs on what was going on with the scene. And,
of Urban.
Yeah, Urban.
Oh, Urban needed
somebody here, kind of.
Yeah. So here's what happened in
But anyway, so yeah, where did he?
Yeah, I know that. There's something.
You know
that
I
can
the answer.
Fill you in on this.
Great.
I got in touch with him in say late '70s. Okay. I'm not sure if it was 76, 77, but here's what happened. I knew about him. Dave Wally told me about him. And I remember talking to him on the phone. And then, you know who I met? I came here in '77, and I met through the Zappa network, Matt Groening.
Oh, yeah.
When he first came here and was doing the Xeroxing. And he Xeroxed all the Hot Rats times for me. Okay. In that 77, 78 period, I read, there's a whole issue about Frank coming to Zurich, or one of those places in Switzerland, and Zurich and Urban was putting on a whole art show.
Yeah, he did that, right?
Right. But what did Frank do? Do you remember what he did?
You know, I heard there was some kind of trouble, but I don't remember now what.
Frank didn't show up.
He didn't go. Yeah.
And Urban, that crushed Urban. It was like his own image in the Zurich art community. He was presenting Frank in the gallery. He laid out whatever was the content of the gallery, all the Zappa stuff, and he wanted the coup de grace have Frank show up and thank you, Urban. Frank did not come. Now probably Matt told me that.
I believe it because there was some kind of a cooling off. Yeah.
I'm just saying I first heard about it with Matt. Then I contacted Urban, and he told me about this.
The whole story.
And he was pissed, and that shocked him. His idol failed, so he almost said, screw civilization, and he went into husbandry.
That made sense. Okay.
Yeah, he went into the country.
Yeah, he definitely became a recluse because he couldn't be gotten hold of.
Actually, another damaged victim of Frank on a certain level. But Frank really was a problem for Urban, as I understood. Maybe Urban would not have...
That was his life.
Right, Frank was his life.
He was a brilliant guy, and that was his life.
How about
Frank.
Craig Pincus? You know Craig?
I know, I've heard of him,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
He
too
did
much.
the Mother's Journal,
Right,
Home Journal.
right.
He was another guy who just disappeared.
Yeah.
And I called him in the late '70s. Said, "Can I get your back issues?"
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of said, "Yeah, I'll try to find them." But he said, "I don't want to." He says,
I won't think about
Frank,
it
that's an
anymore."
old
Yeah.
period." But he did tell me some interesting stories that he got. Frank gave him contacts as a lawyer in the music industry, and he got to represent a lot of Motown guys or something. And Frank gave, but he said, when I was first doing Mother's Home Journal, I did not know Frank. When I met Frank as a result of that and got to know him, then I realized I had a different image. My image did not match the person.
Right.
And then maybe he learned some bad things, but he always complimented Frank for giving him the industry connections in law, being a lawyer. But Gwerder, he really was hurt, and he dropped everything and went into animal. What was he, gathering animals?
It was just
like a Noah's Ark operation.
Yeah, cow herding, really. Just sort of taking him up on the side of the mountain and letting him, letting the herd feed.
Yeah, maybe he thought the apocalypse was coming. And
it was dairy. It's not dairy. It's not like, like my family was in cattle ranching, for
Right.
meat, right?
Yeah.
Just ship him, the stockyards kind of thing.
He wasn't doing
He was
that.
doing the dairy kind of angle.
Yeah, and I think he was even into herbs and things.
Yeah.
I'm not
Oh, yeah.
sure.
He was like really into naturalism.
He was the ultimate hippie in that
Yeah,
sense.
he really was.
Yeah.
He was a neat guy. I liked. I mean, I'd never talked to him, and yet I had such a clear picture of who he was.
Right. So that's what happened.
Yeah.
That gallery thing caused it, and you heard a bit about that.
Yeah, because I have all that stuff, and he was really delicate. I mean, in a certain sense, he was kind of discreet about it. He didn't want to hurt me or kind of cast aspersions on Frank, who he could have done it and it wouldn't have bothered me in the least.
Yeah, that's
I
why
said
he
on
was
my
the
own.
ultimate decent hippie.
He was pretty decent.
And he wouldn't even
But that's interesting to hear the end of the story, because I knew he had just totally distanced himself from that whole milieu. If I had a letter from him at home that I read, it was one of the last ones he sent me, probably before he went away forever to the Alps.
And that's the last you have that you heard from him.
That's the end. 1976. I don't remember the month, but
right.
It was,
Now, why were we talking about Gwerder?
Because I wanted, when I published Opera Jury in '84, I wanted to get a copy to Frank, and I thought I wanted to get a copy to Urban too, because he was a big Jarry person and understood him just beautifully without being a polyglot sensibility. But so I debated whether I should send the book to Frank, and I never did it. And I kind of wish I had, because he if he hadn't been in one of his perverse moods, he would have loved it.
Right. Well, he says in his biography that someone told him that he was a Dadaist. He didn't know about Dada.
Yeah.
And was that you, or do you think?
No, it wasn't me, although I had a sense of him being that way. I just thought he knew all about the movement.
But he
because Varese was involved in the Dada movement.
That's
in
right.
New York.
Yeah, you assumed he knew in '71 when you were with him,
right?
And you never found out he didn't know,
right?
Until he told you in the biography,
right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that was curious. That's where Frank was, of the street, and that's where he was a dog. He was like an amazing, intelligent dog who didn't need any education.
Right.
He was going to do. He knew how to think. He knew how to survive. He knew how to make things. Why did he need anything?
Yeah.
And
who needs history, and who needs precedent?
And then you think of his sort of maybe best friend, the guy who sort of did that, who didn't have anything. Frank had to. He was a Catholic Church kid. He went through society. Then he dropped out in a sense.
Yeah.
Beefheart was always on the outside, so he was on his way to meeting Beefheart.
Yeah.
And they both were dogs.
They kind of both met in the middle.
Yeah, they met in the middle.
Right, sniffing around the curb.
And the myth is Beefheart didn't go to school. He was there, but the myth was that he was a wild kid.
Yeah.
What do they call that movie?
Yeah, a feral kid. Yeah.
A feral?
Yeah, that's like when an animal kind of goes back to the wild.
Right. So, yeah. But what was that movie? The Wild Child.
Oh, The Wild Child.
Yeah. He presented himself as that way.
That's kind of that's what Don. And the thing about Don that's really amazing too, is that is so natural with him. I mean, he doesn't put on anything. He's so just natively eccentric that it's just.
Now there's
really
the difference
boggles the
between
mind.
Frank and Don.
No, Frank knew how to put on a certain. It wasn't that he was a phony, but it's different. It was
Frank
calculated.
The difference is that Don wouldn't mind living in the plague zone. He could have survived.
Yeah.
Frank was afraid. His fussiness was afraid of the plague.
Yeah.
He loved technology. He was the inventor.
Right.
He was the gadget lover.
Right.
And that was the difference between him and Don.
Sure, and the control thing too, because Don didn't control anything. And
Right.
he couldn't even. Oh, I had the funniest thing one time. I remember we went up to he had to put gas in his Volvo. He got a new Volvo. I think his in-laws, his wife's parents gave.
Would that be about 77? Is that what he drove me
75, yeah, 75. And this was when he was doing the thing with Frank, the Bongo Fury tour. And we went up to the corner he had to get gas. And I don't think he did it a whole lot with that car. I mean, the tank was empty and whatever. Maybe his wife put the gas in the car, who knows. It would have been funny if it if it hadn't been sort of kind of sad, he was totally at a loss. You know, how you put, you know, the nozzle in, unscrew the cap, put the, and it was just all these things I could see his mind racing. You know,
is this
like,
his incident you're describing in the book?
I don't know, it's not in the book. It's not.
Oh,
in the book.
but it's that period.
But it was that period
Yeah.
during Bongo Fury, yeah.
And he couldn't
He couldn't
do
do
a
it.
machine.
So I finally kind of, I was a little delicate about it. I said, here, Don, this thing looks pretty cantankerous. Let me do it. And, you know, you go pay the guy. And I think we can do this. You know, so I put the gas in for him, and it was like it's totally spaced.
Yeah, that you got a pun in there, cantankerous.
Cantankerous.
Oh, I'll can the tank for you, Doc.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, the
Yeah.
dialectic between him and Frank was really interesting. When I was with him in the car, though, when I went out to Lancaster and got in there, and then we drove back to a rehearsal in October 77.
Right, that must have taken you forever. He drove so slow.
Right. It was nice, about an hour drive into
Yeah,
Van Nuys.
yeah.
Or Van Nuys.
Van Nuys. Van Nuys, yeah, that would be
Yeah, it's
the
Van
actual
Nuys.
pronunciation. Yeah.
And he was very sober. And until a different person, he was almost like a business person. We're driving in there, you know, totally opposite of the guy I met before.
Oh yeah.
And we talked. I asked him. I said, he had knocked Frank in 72, 73. Then in 75, on the Bongo Fury, he says Frank's the greatest. It was in Rolling Stone, the most creative person on the planet. He, you know, some people say,
he
well,
always zipped backwards,
Right.
bang and bang and bang, one extreme to the other.
Right, but people would say, oh, well, you're working Frank. He's got to praise the boss.
Yeah.
But when I asked him about this, I laid it out to him, and I said, is this a Mutt and Jeff routine that you guys are doing almost as a joke? And he says, yeah.
Yeah.
In other words, he was above. Frank understood the way to play it off each other for media reasons.
It was definitely an old rivalry from high school days.
Yeah.
And you know how it is when you go to high school with somebody and they've been around for years. They know everything about you back when you were grubby, snot-nosed, nothing. You know.
They both knew each other.
knew. You know, yeah, Don. I remember when you were fat and pale and you sat in your room drinking Pepsi all day and eating, stale baked goods from his dad's bread truck.
Right, and you know when Frank was dying in the last few months, Don was calling him.
Yeah.
Now, do you know what what I've been told is that Frank, after Don would call, he'd act like a little kid. He said, geez, Don called me. It was so great. And he'd go on and on like a little kid. In other words, that basic friendship rivalry, it began with Don, it ended with Don.
Yeah,
you know
that's
what I mean?
right. Yeah.
And yet he was maybe he was more passive and not as aggressive. He was resigned to dying, and so he just loved Don as a little kid.
Yeah.
Himself as a kid, his buddy calling him.
Yeah.
That's an interesting. Had you heard of that?
No, it's a nice story though.
Yeah, that they did get back together, and Frank was almost like, it sounded like Don was the guru, and Frank was so glad my priest called me today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's helping me. You know.
Yeah, it's funny because when he was, I heard that he was seriously ill. That there wasn't much hope for him really as early as it was 90. This was 91.
Yeah. They announced it in 91, don't they, Jerry? In November 91 at the Zappa Universe, and yet it was out in the local paper in 90, late 90.
It was floating around. But I heard. I mean, I actually got because a good friend of mine is her boss at work was Ralph Humphrey's old girlfriend from the old band many years ago, and she kept up with what was going on, at home with Frank and stuff. And it was apparently he got like one really horrible diagnosis from the doctor. Like, there's nothing we can do.
That would be in early 90, 89?
That was like 91, yeah. I mean, that was it. I mean, that was it. There was nothing they could do.
It's all over. We'll just see how long you live now.
Is it going to be a year? Is it going to be 2? Is it, well, you hang in there for 3 more. But, anyway, so, and, my friend told me this, we were out having dinner, and she was because she didn't know the extent of how much I'd been involved with Frank. She just knew
you say in the book, nobody knew,
Nobody knew. I didn't talk about it.
Of your new life once you 85 and a journalist and all that stuff.
Yeah, post-Frank. After 75, 76, I didn't talk about Frank.
Anybody who... Yeah. And it's because it was a problem for you.
Once in a while, like, I had Don's picture of me on the wall at home. That portrait of me that he drew. It's in the book, actually.
Yeah, right. You had that.
Yeah, and people would see that it said Don Mifflin. Was that Captain Beefheart?
But you would not encourage it.
But I wouldn't go into big, lengthy things about it. So, anyway, so when I heard that, it was like really, my thought was, geez, I haven't seen Frank in all these years. I wonder if I should go up and just, I thought about it a lot. Should I, make an attempt to go up there and, but what would I say? Why didn't I talk about this stuff before? I mean, when somebody's, dying, that's a heavy load to lay on them.
Right.
I forgive you.
Yeah.
Gee, isn't that why to you?
So you're saying that Ralph Humphrey's friend told you that serious statement. You don't say that in here, I don't think, but that's when you found out that it was bad.
Yeah, I described right at the end of the book. Yeah,
you don't say...
And it was almost like I was on unconsciously, in a sense, a little bit of a death watch. I kept waiting for bad news. And somebody did tell me something had happened. And I just had a sense, my whole body kind of went onto alert, even though this wasn't happening in a really hyper-conscious way. But I could just sort of feel, I wasn't very well myself, strangely enough, that same period. I'm still not sure, I had a really bad infection and knocked out my whole lymphic system. And I had no immunity, and I felt like shit all the time. I was kind of like giddy and dizzy and tired, and just really feeling crappy. And nobody could tell me what was really the matter.
This is 91, 92?
Yeah, 91, 92, and into 93.
So that was another reason why you didn't have the energy to go. You had your own problem.
Yeah, but in a certain sense. Now, see, if I were mystically inclined, I'd say almost like maybe some of Frank's energy kind of got into me.
Right, yeah.
Because it was really mysterious. I'm not a sick person. I've never been sick a day in my life.
Now, did you get sick after you found out he was sick?
Really about the same time.
Yeah,
I can't tell you for sure if it was before or after, but it was right in that same
So a synchronicity factor there.
Yeah, there was. And I could feel somehow that what he was feeling like. It was really strange. I should have put some of that in the book, actually, come to think of it. But anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so after 75, you leave Frank. You're I guess you're kind of angry. You say, look, there's no deal, no problem,
there's
no way to deal with Frank. I got to start a new life. So
there's no words to describe it, because
when you got married, that's another thing.
That was a whole other thing. But there was no words to describe how I felt. I was angry. I was just kind of like I felt a little kind of taste of it in New York when Frank kind of told me, I had to leave the tour.
Yeah.
I felt sort of like I was dying. I really felt like
like it happened again in 75.
Only worse, because it ended so badly, and it didn't make any sense. It's a little bit like that thing probably that Irving Guerra felt. When Frank didn't show up for the thing, and it wouldn't have been any big deal for him to do it. It's like you realize. Well, with me, with a lot of reflection on it, I realized that I had just put too much into my relationship with Frank. As important as he was, I had to let go.
Right.
And but it wasn't easy.
Okay, so then you start corresponding with Guerder. You're in touch with Guerder.
Yeah.
So do you then? What did you focus on? Writing music or Jari? What did you do from 76 to 80? Say.
I did music. I did some music. I had a couple of bands, and I wrote a lot of stuff.
You played in clubs?
And I
professional musician.
Yeah. I also wrote. I did a lot of freelance writing, articles mostly, for different publications.
Did you ever know Lita Lescue?
No.
Which I want to find Lita. Do you know the name? Lita Lescue, a music reviewer for the East Village Other, which might be before your time in the late 60s. But then she was living out here in Woodland Hills and wrote for music magazines. You don't know that name?
I sure don't.
Okay, so you wrote reviews yourself?
Yeah. I didn't write much on music, really. I did. The kind of places I wrote for were places typically like, that was the beginning of the alternative newspaper period. Before there were underground papers and overground papers.
You mean the LA Weekly?
Like the Reader was
the sort of acceptable suburban kind of alternative.
Right, they were more conventional than underground.
Yeah.
But they still supposedly, and it was great. I was able to write, like one of the articles I wrote was about Beefheart in 1980. He had really passed into a total eclipse.
But he came back in 1980.
Yeah. And I was really glad, because I think that article did a lot of good, because nobody was writing about him in those days.
Oh, I'd like to read that. You have to get a copy. Send it to Jerry here.
Yeah.
And we can...
I'd like to get some of your stuff as well. I'd like to read some of his interviews and things, too. Yeah,
right, so you're saying you were on the counterculture, mainstreaming of counterculture, writing for those kind of magazines.
Yeah, those kind of places. And I also wrote a lot for the Herald Examiner Sunday magazine, and the op-ed page, too.
On what? All kinds of articles? Or in the counterculture?
People kind of tend to, when you're doing freelance writing, people tend to type you. And I did cultural stuff a lot. I've always been interested in architecture and, history, Western history. From that, it kind of moved into, I really got more and more fascinated with Western history. Not that I had ever not been, but it became a real focus for me.
You had time to read.
Yeah.
Not on the road.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And, let's face it, I wasn't making a lot of money, and, my time was kind of looser in those days. I wasn't, working at a job or anything. And so, in the late 70s, in 1980, I wrote my first Mark Twain book, which is called Mark Twain in California, which is published by Chronicle. And I did about a year's worth of research on that, going to different, like the Bancroft Library, the Mark Twain papers, and just any place, any repository where they had stuff on Twain in the West in the 1860s. And got really, really fascinated by that. And it kind of took me off in a whole other direction. So.
So this was your
Yeah.
literary self. I mean, you had your
Yeah.
musical self, and then
Yeah.
you had your literary self. So
Yeah.
you dropping your musical stuff. You did your bands, but dropping your intellectual input into conceptual stuff that
Well, I
Frank
stopped-
represented
Right.
went into literary.
I noticed one thing too with the end of my relationship with Frank. I stopped writing orchestra music of any sort.
Did you ever do it again?
When I had a period actually in the late 70s, about 78, 79, somebody gave me a beautiful, not gave me, but let me store a really beautiful concert grand, an 8.5 foot concert grand, and it was in my apartment in Silver Lake, and I did pick out, I got all my old orchestra scores out and kind of played through them and, you know, rewrote spots in them, but, you know, the truth is when you're writing that stuff, if you want to hear it played, good luck.
Yeah.
It's just the economics are really dismal, so.
So you haven't written much on
But-
that way.
Yeah, no, hardly at all.
So you went more writing books,
Yeah.
journalistic
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, and thinking more about larger pictures, because when I was working on music, my view of necessity was a bit small. It was very practical. As you know, I'm writing this piece. Well, how am I going to get this done? Who am I going to get to play it? How's that going to work? You know,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
The Frank problem, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Frank could get it done, and
nuts
look at the problems
and
he
bolts,
had.
Nuts and bolts. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your what was your husband doing in that 75 to 80? Was he writing for the LA Free Press, or was that?
You were doing, let's see, some jobs. He had a couple of. We both freelanced pretty
Left for the
heavily.
LA Times.
Yeah, the LA Times. In fact, he wrote a book that the genesis of the book Literary LA was the late 70s. They were all articles that appeared originally in the Herald Examiner, in the Sunday magazine. We had a good deal with the Sunday magazine of the Examiner for a while, like almost a year. Each of us had a guaranteed article in there every week, one or the other of us. So it kept us afloat and they enabled us to do a lot of good writing, but also a lot of other things as well. And so that was kind of neat.
So as baby
Yeah.
boomers, you became a mainstream journalist a little bit.
Kind of, yeah.
So you
There was
moved-
a period where you could do that. It isn't
Yeah.
like it is now. It's pretty dismal now.
Right. So then, from 80 to 85, what happened?
Early 80s, I was doing still a lot of freelancing, and I finally kind of petered out on that in about 83, I would say. Mark Twain book was out.
Now, were you doing research in Jari all along,
Well,
building up, or was that a 6-month project?
no, I'll get to that in a second. That was an
Okay.
interesting thing. In 83, I met Bill Griffith, who was in Hollywood. In fact, I met Bill Griffith because I had an assignment to interview him for the LA Reader. I'll tell you some other reader stories in a minute that have to do with Matt Groening, which you will find, I think, pretty mind-boggling since you like Confluence.
I
But
know
anyway.
Matt. Yeah, you knew Matt. Is that who he wrote for, the LA Reader?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I looked
Yeah.
up Matt in 1980,
Well, I'll tell
and
you,
he was just driving, delivering the newspaper.
he was a pencil sharpener. and a
Right,
paper
and then
star.
shortly after that, he made the little break
Yeah.
with his girlfriend or something.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, it's a bit. I'll tell you first about that.
Yeah.
How I met Bill Griffith and got into writing The Man with the Axe. Bill was here rewriting a screenplay, and they put him up in the Chateau Marmont. And the bungalow, it turned out, where John Belushi had just died the week before.
Right.
And he'd moved quickly out of the bungalow into the main hotel, and I went and we did an interesting interview, a couple of hours, 3 hours or so long. And during that interview, it came out. I'd never met Bill before, although I certainly knew his work and liked it a great deal. He had always had a fascination with Alfred Jarry. He did a little cartoon bio of him, like back 10 years earlier, like about 72 or something. And anyway, so we hatched up a plot over the ensuing weeks after the article came out. I interviewed him for Playboy, and that appeared. And then we kind of both hit on the same thing at the same time. Let's do a Classics Illustrated biography of Alfred Jarry.
Really?
Yeah. So we did.
Now, because he realized you knew enough about him and were interested.
Well, because he didn't feel like a book-length illustrated bio would go. He just didn't think it would be that great a book. And
So what?
I could
that's
write
what-
the text, he could do the pictures.
Oh, he wanted more text.
Yeah.
So what's it
We
called?
both-
Classic.
Yeah, well, I was like, Classics Illustrated, they used to do
Right.
comic book bios where
That's what he was thinking he couldn't do.
Well, I was being kind of humorous, actually.
Look at it.
I always called it Classics Crucified because,
Yeah. So
but
I
what
see,
we
I see.
were striving to do is to basically bring Jarry to life in a, a little bit like what Frank might have done if he had been interested in dead, proto-Dadaists.
Right.
It's a very vernacular, very colloquial sort of a book. It's full of like current references. It's like the first really American biography of Jarry.
So that's the point. He didn't want to do the comic, but he found someone who could write and
Right.
make it more
Right.
text
Neither of us
than
really,
picture.
neither of us really struggled with the logistics that much. We just said this is something we want to do. You have a writer, you have a great illustrator and a good writer, and let's do this.
And in the middle of that period, you heard from John Vanderdoes.
Yeah, I met him towards the end of it because I had been at the American Booksellers Association convention here in Anaheim, and as a matter of fact, that was the first time I actually saw Bill Griffith. That was a kind of a big time, because I sort of said hi to him because he had the booth across from where I was. Yeah, it's a long story, but anyway, and went and did the interview and all that. But at the same time, I made contact with one of the fellows, whose name I can't remember, I'm afraid, of the Collège des Pataphysiques, who is in the French publications sector of the book convention. And he got kind of, I forgot what it was. I sort of mentioned this as almost a joke. Hey, I think I'm going to write an English language book about Alfred Jarry.
And you hadn't talked to Bill about it yet?
I sort of had just really,
okay, so it was percolating.
Yeah, I was kind of kicking around. It was obviously fertile, for that idea. But anyway, so this guy kind of took a look, and he made a mental note. So anyway, he, I guess, went back to Paris. And John
was a member.
Yeah, John was still in Paris.
And he said, hey, there's someone over there.
Somebody's
thinking
about
yeah, we got to put us
plots and schemes.
Yeah, John, you become our handler.
Right. And by the time John came over to L.A., it was probably a year later.
After the book came out.
And the book was out, and yeah, it was just absolutely hilarious. I thought, John was very secretive about why he wanted to come over and stuff. And we said, hey, you need a place to stay, you can crash on our couch. And we just made the house open to him and took him out to dinner. Came back, and the boys smoked a little bit of material, and we played. I had just done, a friend of mine had a wonderful looking period diner in Silver Lake called Millie's. Looked like about 1930. So we had he starred in it, and I had a guy that looked really bizarre, plays Jarry. And we did a music video, it was a satire of a music video. It was like a rap tune, Alfred Jarry, the Man with the Axe, which was promoting the book.
And when did you did it that time?
This was right at that same time.
And John
was there. Yeah, it was right after we'd shot it, and I had the film, and I also had the music, and I played in the music. And I realized John was a great person, because he not only did he get it, he was just laughing till the tears were running down his cheeks. So anyway, we became friends as a result of that. And then he told me the whole plot from the Collège des Pataphysiques.
Oh, how it's a secret society.
Yeah, and they don't like people that are starting up what look like competing organizations. This organization, you got to be kidding.
Yeah. It's a bureaucratized dataism.
If this was this was an organization, Captain Beefheart would be the president for life.
That's right. No, so you didn't know why there was this intrigue until John told you.
Right, then John finally came clean about it, and it was just, we all had a good laugh about it.
Yeah, you can't become a member. You get asked to be a member. Right. You don't even know it exists.
Yeah.
It's like it's a miming and intelligence organization.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I thought it was just great. But anyway, that's how... Anyway, that brings us up to like 85.
And then you get into the B'nai B'rith
And then I was working, Lionel was working at the Messenger, and that funny thing happened with the PMRC and Frank.
Right. Okay, now, what interactions did you have with the LaRouche organization in that period? Because they were very controversial with Proposition 86.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they're down on the ADL. The ADL doesn't like them. Did you, as you being part of a Jewish paper, was there much of that interaction with the LaRouche problem?
I didn't see it. Was that a problem?
I was, being editor of the Mess, was always interested in LaRouche, but nothing.
They never attacked you, wrote articles about you or things, because they do that in their newspaper.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. I mean,
I also was a member of an Orthodox Russian.
Yeah. What do you say?
Speak ahead.
It's an Orthodox paper, but I myself am an atheist and a socialist. And they really put up with me as the editor, partly because I was pretty good at it, but also because I'm related to the Rebbe, Schneerson.
And the guy in New York?
Yeah,
just died.
The guy who just died.
Well, the menu and the family is all.
They're all related.
That's right.
Yeah, and I wrote a book about it, but.
So you had a bit of status in there, in that sense.
I mean, the truth is, anybody who really pushed me could tell that I wasn't your typical Jewish, your basic socialist revolutionary doing the work.
So they and what happened? You went up to meet Don? No.
Yeah,
that's in '75 though.
Yeah, that was back in '75 during the Bongo Fury period. And,
right.
I was rapidly approaching dissolution with the whole thing.
Yeah.
With Frank.
Well, I knew Nigel right at the end of that period, and Ruth Underwood lived at our house for a while.
Right. So when you met Don in '75, at that what did you think of Don? As a socialist Marxist.
I liked Don. I mean, we stayed up all night. It was a good.
Was it? Did you find him a bizarre? Or were you simpatico mentally with him?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got along great. Actually.
Yeah. So you had that anarchist
I
inclination.
liked Don a lot better than I liked Zappa, actually.
Yeah.
And I also
In
thought
fact-
Don. I also thought Don was actually a genius, and Zappa wasn't.
Yeah, that's the paradox about the two of them.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
in productivity, Frank's a genius,
Yeah.
you know, but Don represents something, and
Something.
that's the dialectic that I'm always working on.
Yeah.
So you want to add something to that dialectic, or have we already discussed it in a way?
We talked about it,
Yeah.
I think.
But yeah, so you that's what everybody wondered, you know, which came first, Don or Frank, you know, chicken and the egg, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so you side on Don's, you take Don's side.
Yeah, but
Well, I
I mean,
think-
remember, I basically like classical music only, and
Yeah.
a little bit of jazz.
So that's why you didn't like Frank.
Yeah, so you're not going to get seduced by the rock beat.
We'll return with Nigey Lennon and Bob Dobbs in a moment.
This is really good.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting.
That's actually interesting. 'Cause
You're getting what?
Well, it was sort of strange, I think. I mean, Nigel says that she didn't have any contact with Zappa. Actually, during that period.
I was going to come to that, actually, yeah.
No, wait a minute. I just said this is great, and then
Yeah.
you weren't commenting on me by saying that's too bad or what?
No, what he was going to say was he was going to tell a story about at the Messenger and the PMRCs.
Okay. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to tell it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. If you could just sit maybe right here,
Okay.
or sit at here so this mic can pick it up.
Kneel on the
I guess we can move that forward.
And
So
then
you're okay?
Bob,
You-
refrain from talking too loud while he's talking
Right.
and interrupting because I got to ride the level.
Right. But you're okay so far? Still got the energy to keep going?
Oh, sure.
Good.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Bob, just say we return.
I don't. You do.
Oh,
Well, you could.
No,
Confuse the
and
hell out
and,
of
and Lionel
Rolf.
Rolf
Or
will
Rolf.
join us. Okay. Let me see. We now return with Nigey Lennon, Bob Dobbs, and we're joined with. And introduce yourself.
Lionel Rolfe. I'm Nigel husband and also a writer and editor and all that sort of thing. And for about 10 years I edited the B'nai B'rith Messenger, and one day this lady comes with a story about the PMRC saying that it had anti-Semitic components. I didn't, I wasn't all that motivated because I'm not a big rock and roll fan.
To say
But
the
it
least.
was a good yarn, and so I said, so she wrote a few pieces about the anti-Semitism of the PMRC, and during that period, and of course she was dealing directly with Frank all that time, and I'd known Frank briefly towards the end of Nigey's relationship with him. And so one day I interviewed him for the Messenger, and he invited both of us to come up to the house, and I guess I wasn't too anxious to.
Well, couldn't blame you, yeah.
So we never really, and then I did talk to Nigel about it, and she wasn't.
Well, actually,
just-
yeah, Lionel tried to convince me to do it. He
Oh,
said,
did I?
you really, yeah, you did. He said, you really ought to at least give him a call and say hi, because he sounded like he really wanted to hear from you. And I said, well, it's not easy to let the past, go away and stay there. It's, too much stuff would be coming
Well,
up. that
I was
couldn't
also the
handle.
one who encouraged Nigel when Zappa died to write the piece,
Yeah.
because I could see she was really upset.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it very easily developed into
Yeah.
a book, and I was hoping it would get rid of all the Zappa stuff. But
Instead of becoming an industry.
But now you said you went up. Did you go?
no,
Oh,
I
you
just,
didn't
I,
go.
but I
He interviewed him by phone.
Yeah,
Ah.
I talked to him by phone, and
So that
and
would have been if you
we
did
were,
go.
So what's sort of the strange thing of an Orthodox Jewish newspaper? I think it's one of the oldest papers in Los Angeles. Orthodox Jewish newspaper being sort of a pipeline for anti-PMRC stuff, and I got a kick out of that. I mean, it made the perverse part of me feel.
So it would have been an opportunity for Nigel to see Frank again if you had gone up. If you had
Yeah,
gone to
sure,
see Frank,
sure.
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
and you sort of blocked it, or you blocked it?
No. Well, Lionel wasn't super anxious. He
It
brought
was
it up.
mutual.
Yeah.
He said, well, if you want to go, we'll
Go, yeah.
And you said no,
I
and
think
that
I'll
supported
pass,
his
yeah.
view. Yeah.
And that was the end. And yeah.
So so we're talking about. So what would you say? How would you characterize the dialectic between Don and Frank? Could you talk a bit about that? I mean, you favor Don.
Well, my basic impression, I was a little, partly I suppose it was some jealousy when I first met Nigel. I was attracted, and here she was all, obsessed with this fucking rock and roll musician.
Yeah.
From my standpoint.
Yeah.
Who actually, I guess, kind of liked me.
In fact, I think Lionel might be the only person who Frank liked better than that person liked him.
Really?
Yeah.
And this, because you had met him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he met him on a lot of
Quite a
occasions
few
and had all
occasions,
kinds of
and I guess
conversations.
what I was actually kind of upset about him with it was how he treated his musicians, because I grew up with chamber music where the musicians really respect each other and work with each other.
Well, with chamber music, you work on an intuitive level.
Yeah.
And it's very high level.
And
But how did you know Frank?
Through Nigey.
But when did you meet Nigey?
We actually met.
We met in '73, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so
73.
you had some interaction with Frank and saw this from '73 to '79.
Yeah,
yeah,
you actually,
yeah.
Lionel goes
Okay.
back a ways,
Yeah.
too.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
didn't like the way he treated musicians.
Yeah, that really upset me quite a
Yeah.
bit. And you know, I was just also I think the parts of him that were too much like an avant-garde composer got on my nerves a lot, because I have a, you know,
You're a populist in a sense, and that's too snobbish.
Some
no,
sort-
I've been accused of being culturally sort of a Tory and politically kind of, you know, I'm progressive, I think, but culturally, I mean, I like my Bach, my Beethoven, and
Oh, so you're not interested in the avant-garde, or not?
more of it not interested. I think a lot of it really is crap.
Right.
And-
So yeah, aesthetically,
And-
you disagree with his view.
And in
There's-
fact, in my book Literary LA, I have a whole chapter on Thomas Mann and Schoenberg. That's a long story. I won't go into, but because my mom used to concertize with Michael Mann, who was Thomas's son, and so the Manns, when I grew up, we knew the Mann family really well, and I knew quite a bit about the genesis of Dr. Faustus. And of course, Dr. Faustus essentially is a book which says that Arnold Schoenberg represented the decline of German civilization. That's what Leverkusen was.
Yeah.
And so I've often written on the subject of Schoenberg, and Ronald Schoenberg, his son, who's a municipal judge in Beverly Hills, has got me fired from the LA Times, and he's really chased me around because, you know, but I was only reacting, talking about Schoenberg, to the fact that he was essentially, the word Putmeister really kind of applies. And when I was a kid in my mom's home, you know, people like, you know, the French composer,
Milieu.
Milieu, and
Yeah.
you know, a lot of people were around our house because my mother's a pianist, and there was, you know, always a lot of people, and they all had an incredible. They all felt that Schoenberg was a fraud and a phony. And I guess I never really kind of dropped that attitude.
So here you see someone who's totally influenced in a way by that.
Well, in fairness to him, I think actually Frank had some good musical taste. He didn't think much of Schoenberg, and you
Right.
can almost always tell when somebody likes Schoenberg. They're usually pseudo-intellectual.
Yeah, so you would say he's not a Schoenbergian, but he was still within the avant-garde camp, which
Well,
you
Frank, you know, Lionel and Frank had they had some strange things in common, despite both of them, perhaps. Frank was, as avant-garde as he was still kind of conservative, I think, culturally,
Yeah.
in the sense that, especially the composers that he liked were all 19th century figures.
This is the Beefheart dialectic.
There you go.
You know, Frank, who controlled and not
Yeah,
controlled.
right. And Frank really liked composers who pushed tonality as far as you could push it, but never abandoned it entirely.
Right.
Therefore, for him, he'd much rather have listened to Webern or Baird than to Schoenberg, because there is at least a suggestion of a skeletal kind of, it's not exactly a melodic structure, but you can see the bones of a
It was like
melodic structure.
like Bartok has
Or
done
Bartok.
very 20th century things with melody.
Yeah.
It's highly melodic, but it's
It's
kind of
not
in that strange
composition.
fractured.
Yeah, it's not composition
sort
by
of way.
slide rule. It's
Yeah.
composition by
You know,
breaking
and
down.
I also
parts
grew
of
up with
something.
a prejudice towards Bartok, because Bartok wrote his great violin concerto he wrote for my uncle, for Yehudi, and Yehudi actually subsidized and supported him in the last days of his life and so on. So I knew a lot about
Yeah.
the Bartok, what you call it. But I just, to me, when I think of really great composers in the 20th century, and we produced actually some pretty good ones, you know, like Bartok and Prokofiev, and you know, maybe even Copland in this kind of second-rate sort of way. You know, then you're really talking about greatness, and I think Zappa had talent, and some of the later stuff actually was pretty good. You know, I wasn't that impressed at the time with it, but you know, there could have been certain sexual jealousy I felt. And,
But now, if you heard more of his work and looked at it
you know,
all,
some of the later stuff I've heard, actually, I realized he had more talent than I was willing to admit. What I think I did feel about the Beefheart thing, and it wasn't so much Beefheart's music that I liked, it was his lyrics.
Yeah.
And And so when we spent that, we went out around 9 o'clock, I think, in the evening. And
No, we didn't. We
Denny's
went out at about like midnight.
and
Yeah.
the sun came up, and we were still
Still
going
sitting
at it. And I
talking.
really liked the way Beefheart's mind worked, But
Yeah,
there
it's
again,
really-
that was music. That was not.
Right. You went till, did you say, till the sun came up?
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
we
finally had to
passed
kind
it.
of. They made us kind of leave. I mean, we had to be getting there 1 cup of coffee,
Yeah.
But Don had a cup of tea.
But I just liked the way his mind worked, and I was just.
Whose? Frank.
Don's.
No, Don.
Don's.
You disliked the way Don's mind.
No, I did. I liked
Oh,
the
you
way
liked-
his mind worked,
Yeah.
and I was just more impressed by him than. And in terms of the music and the way I sort of reacted to the sort of Hitlerian way that I thought Zappa ran his. In fairness, he wasn't working with the same caliber musicians that you would work with, even George Duke and so on. I mean, they're good, but I suppose a lot of really good classical musicians playing with each other are going to generally be of a higher level.
Well,
Yeah.
what happened towards the end of his life, Frank did work more with those kind of musicians.
Yeah, the ensemble moderne.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Finally found somebody
He found
to do
people
it.
that understood what he wanted them to do.
Yeah. So you say that Frank liked Lionel more than Lionel liked Frank.
Yeah.
Did you guys have aesthetic conversations?
Yeah.
Cultural
they did.
discussions?
They did,
Yeah.
yeah. I remember one. It consisted of Lionel saying to Frank, after especially noisy rehearsal, he looks to Frank's sitting in his chair about like where Jerry is now, and Lionel standing looking down at him, and he says, "What would you do?" Meaning all this electrical, electric instruments. Says, "What would you do if you had a power failure?" And he figured that would floor Frank totally. Frank looked up at him and said, "We'd get a generator."
I don't like. I mean, to me, instruments have been around for a couple of millenniums, developing like the violin, and I like acoustic instruments, and I'm a guy who, when Bob Dylan picked up the
Electric guitar, he
you
thought it was
playing
all over.
electric was over for me.
Yeah.
Although I'd studied guitar, classical guitar, so I felt a little.
Do you have many contacts on the East Coast? Do you know Bob Fass and the WBAI people?
No.
Oh.
I'm real Californian.
You've stayed here most of your life.
Almost all my life. I went to London for Nigel and I went to London for about a year.
Yeah. Why did you go? How did you end up in London? What was? Did you do the album and that was the place to go?
You came with
I
me.
had, Lionel was there, and
But that's
I was working on
73.
I was
73,
working on
yeah.
working on the menu, and so I'd gotten it in advance from Putnam to go do a
Yeah.
book.
Oh, I see. So actually, your relationship started in '73.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
it was kind of spotty, but yeah,
Yeah.
that was the period it was on. And
So that's why you're over there.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I wanted to peddle my demo that
Yeah.
Frank had produced, and over there it seemed like a good opportunity because there wasn't anybody stateside who could appreciate it. And I found out it was an interesting experience for me because for 6 months I had an agent there at William Morris peddling it for me and got some nibbles and stuff, but nothing came of it. So it was
Did you
ultimately,
meet Pamela Zarubica over there?
No.
Did you ever meet Pamela Zarubica?
Just once, yeah.
Where was
Did
that?
In, she came to a rehearsal, believe it or not, in L.A. about 74, I guess it was.
In the
Yeah.
after Grandma
Yeah.
Zoo.
Yeah.
And now she's someone who has a grievance against Frank.
I'm sure she does, yeah.
She's another one felt burnt.
Yeah. Well, because if anybody going back that far with Frank at the beginning knew a different person than you later became.
Did you
And-
read the book Michael Gray?
Yeah,
was based
I
on
did.
an
I just
issue?
read that recently. Yeah.
What did you think of that?
I think that's not a bad book.
For
I mean,
showing
because
that
it shows the
66, 67.
transformation. Yeah, it shows what he was and what sort of, in a sense, I think what, if I can paraphrase, an entire book simply, it seems like what sort of being sort of on the hot seat and having to put a public persona together, which is, in a certain sense, was alien to Frank. I
Yeah.
really felt that. Knowing him, what he ended up being as a result was kind of a grotesque figure.
Mm.
That's what Gray seems to be saying in that book, and it only got worse in the accident. He agrees with me, which is, I felt that a bit gratifying because people seem to think I was nuts for saying I think poor Frank just got really knocked in the head and things happened to him afterwards, but Gray says the same thing. That essentially his personality changed drastically
After
that
71.
incident.
Yeah. The I forget what the drift was. Did you just a side issue? Did you ever interact with Bukowski?
Yeah, so if you read Literary LA, I have a whole chapter about Nigel and I went out and got drunk with him and went to various
Spent a
bars
night
in
drinking
Hollywood.
with the guy, yeah.
Yeah,
And
you
I
know.
have a whole in the book that I gave you.
Was that
a whole
about
chapter.
76, 77?
When was that?
About 80.
80. Because there was a Rolling Stone article on Bukowski in 1976 in May, June.
No, I didn't write it.
No, but
not
I
good
read,
enough to write in Rolling
I was in
Stone.
New York and I came out here, and that article helped me find out where he lived, or maybe
Uh-huh.
the address or something. So I called him. So I went and visited him, and then when I went back to Toronto in 77, 78, I would call him up, but I didn't have a tape recorder, and it was unbelievable how he would talk to me over the phone. I mean, he'd just go total pervert, and he'd just say, "I won't go into it. Think I can go into it, Jerry?" Yeah.
Yeah. I get the drift.
Anyways, so I spent 6 months talking to him like once a month, and he would really, maybe the phone did it to him. He would just do an instant autobiographical replay of who he was with last night, and what he did. And so I got it for 6 months. So
that's great.
Yeah, so that was.
You made tapes of that stuff.
Yeah, I wish I had taped. That would have been priceless. Yeah, I had a thought there. We're talking about. So that's The Messenger in '85,
right?
And I guess I would go on another level now. When you were involved with Frank, as a young woman, what did it not? Was it because of the mood of the time, the sexual license? Was there any thought of his wife? Were you too young to think? Because since you've been hijacked by an alien,
right? Who cares about that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah. Did you ever think about that, or was there a moral quandary about doing that, or it didn't matter?
Well, I took my cues from Frank. I watched closely how he conducted his private life.
Is that part of the tension you're referring to? You mean it's not said, but that's what you're realizing. There's a bit of morality here that's going to be violated at a certain level.
And yet it didn't seem morality is something. I had come to this conclusion early in my life, which is that if society foisted on you, that's not morality, that's something else. It's when the two people involved in the relationship have a disagreement that it becomes immoral to hurt another person.
Right.
And I just didn't see anything that would indicate. I mean, it wasn't obviously like where it kind of began to dawn on me that there was, maybe sort of a funny situation was when I was staying there, and I was down in the basement, and I heard an argument upstairs, obviously Frank and his wife having it out over the fact that I was there.
Yeah, you didn't say it was the voice of Gail in the book, but it was definitely the voice of Gail?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And, I mean,
And you didn't hear what they argued?
I got the drift of it. I could understand a few words here and there. And
was it about you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't say that in the book, but it's implied, I guess.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you say? Because you weren't sure?
No, it's not because I wasn't sure. It was because the way it came to me as an impression was, it was about me, and yet it wasn't about me.
Right.
It was the ongoing argument in their relationship. It was not a new one.
You did not know that at that instant.
I just sensed it.
You sensed it was an ongoing argument.
Yeah,
so in other words, you heard what they deal, what they do.
It's like hearing two people that have played a duet, like you were describing between Don and Frank.
Yeah.
Both parties knew their roles real well,
but new challenges came up to it.
Yeah, they would jam on different changes, shall we say?
Yeah.
And that's what that was. So, and then I began to realize, well, this is a neurotic scene I have wandered into, and I hated to think
not
of
erotic, new erotic. It could be different levels there. Yeah.
And I started to think, that was a little disappointing. I mean, I had a lot of conflicting feelings about it. I mean, first thing I thought was, I didn't think Frank was neurotic or in a neurotic situation, but he evidently was with that, and I didn't want to be part of it, and it just made me feel kind of creepy. It wasn't so much, well, gee, am I, hurting somebody else, because the somebody else obviously may not have liked it, but in another sense, obviously she had been putting up with it for a long time, because I later heard stories that made me look like nothing.
Right.
In fact, there was another, during that tour in New York, there were like no less than three gals who Frank had relationships with previously, who all showed up at the same time. The only one that he let hang around was this one redheaded filmmaker who I referred to as Miss Moviola.
And did you know her real name?
Karen something. I can't think of her last name.
Did she do well in the underground cinema?
She was a trustafarian. She just was sort of like dabbling in film, I think.
Just a what?
A trustafarian. She had money from a wealthy family.
Trustafarian.
Trustafarian money. So, I mean, I don't know what ever became of her, and I don't think she went on to do anything, because judging by kind of the picture that I got of her, she was, a nice enough person, but not really anybody who had any real creative drive. Frank was using her because she had good connections with he's bringing out the movie.
Yeah.
She knew critics, she knew, important people, and he was just sort of jollying her along. She was really pretty too, but I mean, it was, that kind of a relationship. So I could see that, but and then the other two gals were women he'd known in the village when he was there in '66, and they'd had ongoing relationships with him off and on too, and I began to realize, gee, there's a lot of competition for this job.
Did that make you think, did you wonder, am I subjectifying our love relationship, that there's a love aspect more than there really is? Like was that a question?
I never thought there was a love relationship with us.
But you felt that you had a special relationship. You sort of spelled that out. There was something special.
Well, because, see, when you say love, it's like both parties go into it with their eyes closed and their fingers crossed, right? I don't think either of us had our eyes closed. I might have more than Frank. but there still was a lot of really good, warm stuff that came through, I think, that relationship for both of us. It wasn't what I would call a conventional love relationship at all.
Right. I would say that you were unique because your music ability and
Yeah.
you're a woman. We talked about that.
Yeah.
Do you think that made you still feel special, even though these other women were
That was
coming around?
exactly. I told
Yeah.
myself, well, it's like the way I describe in the book about, about this gal, Ms. Moviola. I said, the truth is, she still can't jam on the blues with him all night the way I can.
Right. So you had that edge.
Sure. Yeah.
And because through the years I've met different people who knew a woman who
Mhm.
had an affair with Frank
Oh,
whenever
yeah.
he went to New York or someplace
Sure.
in the 70s and 80s. It
Yeah.
went on.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the myth is that Gail built the studio,
Mhm.
encouraged the studio to get
keep
Frank
him
back,
home.
keep
Yeah.
him home.
Well, that would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Keep him wanted.
Now there was when you walked back into the room the night with Miss Moviola.
Mhm.
I don't
Oh
remember
yeah,
the
that
date.
wasn't. Yeah, that was actually the after. It was not even afternoon. It was like early, noonish time.
Right, and the lights were low.
The
right?
lights were
You went open, and I can't remember.
I went to get
you
my
imply
wallet.
a great image. Fill us in what you saw. You like this writhing.
Writhing the
Was-
beast with two backs.
Yeah, yeah.
Dr. Zircon's evil creation, because we're talking about the sock and all the experimental
Was
stuff.
he doing that with her? That
Not
kind of-
really, it was just sex, but it just had this feeling about it of like, because obviously I was in a state of hyper awareness
Yeah.
at that point, and it was like it was a shock and a real transformation because I had never up until
You saw the dog.
yeah
You
the
saw the
dog was
dog.
humping.
The dog was. He
Yeah.
looked like totally
Yeah,
animalistic.
yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
And I had never.
writhing.
I had that sense of Frank before, but I had never seen him actually having sex with another person. So I walked in, and there it was, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, okay.
Well, Gail in Rock Wives. Have you read Gail?
Yeah.
She says she has walked
yeah.
in places
Yeah.
where she saw Frank with another woman
Yeah.
and didn't like it, but she put up
What
with
can
it.
you do?
Yeah. So, and I always wondered if you were one of them, but it sounds like she
that
never
argument,
came down.
she never. No, for some reason, she never came down to the basement when I stayed there. She never came down there, and
It was a two-level,
it
two-world
was,
house, wasn't
oh
it?
boy, was it ever! Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, well, that Dr. Zircon sign was right over the entrance
Upstairs?
as you came in. Yeah, and it was
I came in from the street or from the kitchen up
like
above.
if you came from upstairs, like the living.
It's on the door above.
Right, yeah.
And you go down
And
into
then you
the
go down into the dungeon. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
pretty symbolic.
But how did you ever see that sign if you never?
Well,
walked?
I went into the house a few times. Like I went into
When
the
she
kitchen.
wasn't around.
Yeah, she wasn't. I didn't see her. She wasn't there, the whole time. I mean, I guess she went out and did things.
Yeah, I was at the house in
You said like in 70 or
March
70,
70, the
yeah.
first week, and later in the
Right.
week, Friday night, Saturday.
Did you go back after the remodel?
Yeah,
Because-
I was
yeah,
going to do this.
Yeah.
In March 70,
hmm
did you see the Hot Rats concert? No, you would be.
The Heart Rats.
You were
concert.
still young. You were in school.
Which Heart Rats concert? Because I saw it.
March 70 at the Olympic.
Oh, absolutely.
Olympic?
That was terrific. Yes,
Yeah.
I love that.
With Shuggy Otis.
there
it?
was Ian and Sugarcane Harris.
Yeah, Sugarcane
Yeah,
Harris.
and Max Bennett and Karate Ainsley on drums. Yeah, and matter of fact, Frank did a whole number, which I'm sure you remember. It's a real Dadaist situationist thing of collecting clothes from the audience.
Right.
And hanging them up on the mic stand.
Right.
The red pants belong to me.
Really? You
Yeah.
were in the front? You
Yeah.
got a good seat?
Yeah, right.
Well,
But,
maybe you could answer this. He came
yeah.
out,
hmm
and when the show started, the first thing he said, "The monster in the sky," and what I always thought he was commenting on pop radio,
hmm
and "Spirit in the Sky" was big right
Right.
at that point.
Right.
Do you know why? Is that what he was referring to when he goes "monster in the sky"?
I'm not sure. I don't remember that.
I mean, it's this conceptual continuity, monster
yeah,
magnet,
something.
but he could fit it into.
Maybe like, well, maybe he was thinking of something like if you're sitting in a movie theater watching a cheesy sci-fi movie and the opening, the credits roll, the first thing you see is the monster on the horrible nylon string. And
Right.
he's probably,
Okay. It
you're-
means that maybe he's I'm the monster. I'm back.
Yeah,
I'm the monster
yeah,
in the sky.
Yeah, because it's like, in a drive-in. It's a lot like a drive-in. That was a stand-up kind of a festival seating, quote-unquote.
Yeah.
Everybody's like crowded towards the front of the... Probably looked just like a drive-in theater to him.
Right. Yeah.
was
Maybe
looking
that's
at
what
it.
it was
Yeah.
a personal thing. But I thought it was just his comment on the latest hit song.
Yeah.
In the.
Well, it could be that, too. But
Yeah.
all purpose,
Yeah, that's where he's really smart. He can say
Mhm.
something, or he can get an impression. Oh, this relates collectively. I'll say it.
Right,
You know what I
throw
mean?
it in there. Oh,
Yeah.
he did that a lot, yeah.
Yeah. Now the in that concert, I went down after. I'd met him a few days
Mhm.
before. That's when the conceptual continuity thing. I told Frank it's time to release the conceptual continuity idea. We're on to it. Time to screw with it, and
Yeah.
muddle it up.
Right.
Play with it. So, I went down behind the stage, and all these people were hanging around ready to try to talk to him. There were
Mhm.
kids saying, "Frank, take my record, take my record."
Yeah,
All this
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But what struck me is he just went down. He was nice. What he did with one there was a woman, probably a friend from years ago, a beatnik woman, and he went over like you crawl along like a Groucho Marx kind of walk. I'll just do it here. He went like this to her, like she was over there, like she's got a new friend, like she knew the dog. She goes, "Hi, Frank," and she was older, old friend. And he sees her and he goes like this, like that. He goes, and she's there like giggling, but he just did it jokingly.
Yeah, yeah.
And so then he got up, and he talked to a few kids. And he said, "Call my office, call my office." And he had to get out of there. And he walked down, and he was walking. I watched his walk, and he looked. He had the tight asshole of a gay fag person at that point.
Yeah, I know
you
what you
I
mean. I know what you mean. Yeah.
And I said, "Jesus, Frank's is a homosexual."
He must be gay, right?
Yeah, something. I mean, I don't want to.
I know exactly what you mean because like
You've seen that walk.
Yeah, I know exactly.
It was like totally. It was strange because he was sort of masculine to me.
Oh yeah.
There
was nothing really swishy about it.
Yeah, it wasn't swishy. He just had a very tight bun, and it waddled, and he had a nerd, Monty Python ridiculous walk.
He really did. His whole body. I just was fascinated by his body motions because the way he was built. Was so strange.
That's right. He was a collage of different.
Really, body parts that didn't fit.
Yeah. So you would say that he wasn't. I mean, is that a gay stereotype? That
I know
tight
exactly.
asshole thing?
I know what you mean from the back. He had sort of his butt had a certain look to it. Yeah.
It was up.
Yeah.
It was like primping, I guess.
Yeah. Almost. He had a certain arrogance in his carriage.
That's right, and he just walked on real fast, and he had this great way of being. His head was above everything.
Yeah. His chin. He led with his chin.
Yeah. He led with his chin.
Yeah.
And he just disappeared.
Yeah.
But I never got over that image. But I realized when I looked at him later, the body parts, I said, "Yeah, he was a weird body." You know, and then.
Yeah, he really did.
So
and of course, after the accident, it got a lot worse because one leg was a lot shorter than the other.
Actually, what I saw did not exist. I assume later.
But he was always like really kind of klutzy. Even before he was.
But
injured.
he walked so gracefully in a way.
Yeah. It was attitude though.
He was a donkey. He's the logos.
Yeah.
This awkward donkey that.
There was a horsey quality to him, but it wasn't quite a horse. It was like a zebra.
Giraffe.
A giraffe.
This is a cybernetic gazelle.
Yeah.
And so those animal terms, I always thought he knew he looked like that.
Yeah.
He was like pigs and repugnant and all that stuff. Yeah. So you saw that.
Oh yeah.
And so you would agree that he didn't walk like that after his accident.
No, in fact, when he walked, it was kind of painfully, and he walked with a limp. The last time I saw Frank physically, with my own eyes, in person, was at the Santa Monica Civic concert, which I can't remember if it was like December of '80 or January of '81. But
was that the Solemnitsky?
The Solemnitsky concert.
Yeah.
And I saw him walk across the stage when he came out at first, and my heart just like started to, it hurt almost to watch him because he was walking painfully.
Yeah.
It just, almost was like I remembered when he first got up out of the wheelchair and tried to walk. It was almost the same, just a little faster.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only saw him, whenever I saw him in the years after that, he was always sitting down and that, so I never saw much of that, other than walking stage, but he sort of walked on slow.
Yeah, he was, I had a guy did a thing at LA, the bookstore here in Santa Monica, last weekend, and in fact, it was pretty funny. The guy was talking about watching Frank conduct. He actually saw him, I don't know whether it was live or in a film or whatever, but he said it was the most angular, funny-looking conducting.
That's right.
No grace and no corners, angles only. And that was Frank. Black or white. Up or down, fast or slow,
No, I'm not sure. That was Frank in what sense?
Well, the description of Frank's angular conducting style, like
that this guy just noticed.
This guy had seen it and was describing it, and he hit it right on the head, inadvertently or otherwise, because that was the way Frank did things. Was in a very angular fashion. Like you listen to his guitar playing, as florid as it is kind of on an axis. It's up, it's down. And
he was like taking perpendicular angles.
Yeah.
He was like a control person trying to be chaotic.
Yeah.
And doing fractals or something or whatever.
Right.
I don't know,
he was fascinated by fractals, actually.
Yeah. Okay, there was another thing. When you had your last, personal interaction, you say, I read this to Jerry, and I didn't know it was not obvious, but I think he went first. At least I hope so. I said, Jerry, that means he came first. Jerry says, it does? Is that what you mean?
No, not there. What I meant, I was talking, actually, I wrote that with a real feeling of despair. In other words, it was a situation in the bathroom at the rehearsal hall.
Yeah, you're in the bathroom.
No, we hadn't got to the...
Yeah, you walked to the bathroom and locked the door.
Yeah, well, in other words...
he went first.
Oh, yeah, well, you could look at it that way, and then it's funny, but...
But you don't mean it that way.
No, I think he went to the bathroom first and went in as opposed to, in other words, he was the instigator, not me. If I was the instigator, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, that's what you're saying. It doesn't make. See,
yeah.
walk to the bathroom, and lock the door. That means you're inside it already.
Right. Yeah, I know. You could look at it that way, I suppose.
So I thought he came first. It was like, he loved me more. He couldn't hold it longer.
Right.
It was sort of a very intimate section.
What it meant is I was like feeling real shame when I wrote that. I mean, because my
I used the guilt. Yeah, so you're saying I think he started it.
He started it.
Yeah, at least I hope so.
I hope so.
God will decide that, right? He'll judge.
Well, that was it. The cosmic. It was like the final kind of degradation.
Right.
It couldn't get any worse, kind of thing.
So no, it's like, when you die, you go to God. They'll play the videotape.
Right.
He said, 5, 4, Frank went first. You get out. Frank goes to hell.
Right. Yeah. Frank would have appreciated that.
Yeah. So okay, but I just remembered you were going to say something about Matt Groening.
Oh, Matt
there was
Groening,
a story in there.
Mm-hmm. Matt, when we started Lionel and I started working for the LA Reader virtually when it began, because James Vowell, who was the original editor, he's now the publisher of it, in kind of a continuing thing, but he had worked at the LA Times, and Lionel had met him there when he was on the copy desk at the opinion page. Anyway.
This was 78, 79?
This was
or 80?
78, I guess. I wrote my first article for him in '79. Lionel got in a little earlier, I think.
And is Matt there right then?
Matt started out right at the beginning, as far as I remember. He was like general factotum, Mr. Pencil Sharpener, schlepper.
Right. This is the life in hell. This was
it
hell.
was. It was. I mean, it was horrible. And James, the guy who was editing it, was not. He was really sharp, but he was really nitpicky. He didn't see right away. Matt had all kinds of, pretty neat cartoons. They were pretty darn funny. But you couldn't get them published anywhere because they were drawn kind of in a very simplistic style. And people said, you don't know how to draw. So we did in 1980, we did an event. Matt was still schlepping for the Reader. We did an event at a coffee house in Silver Lake called the Onyx, which was about to kind of go out of business, and it needed a real shot in the arm to hang on to it. So it was like a rent party almost. But we organized this thing called a literary circus, where we had, for 12 hours, we had people coming in and reading poetry, doing musical performances, we had art displays and all kinds of neat stuff. And it got a lot of publicity for it, the coffee house, and that was a good thing. So one of the things, Matt kind of heard we were putting this on, and he kind of came to us with hat in hand. I just cherish this memory, it is hilarious. And begged us for a little bit of wall space so we could put up some of his panels, his comics, right? So we said, sure, Matt, why not? We were really so magnanimous. We should have gotten a medal,
And this is 1980?
1980.
It would, because I saw him in April '80. So when is this?
When was that?
Fall or summer?
Yeah, it was August, September.
Yeah. Okay.
Pretty hot, that's for sure. It was like almost 100 degrees that day. Anyway, so Matt's stuff went up, and I think he actually sold a couple of things. And I guess, his career kind of gradually started creeping forward, but before it really did, there was a funny thing that happened. Matt and another guy who worked at the Reader called Richard Gere, they were a couple of art students, basically.
G-E-H-R?
G-E-H-R.
Doesn't he write for The Voice?
No, he does.
Yeah, The Voice, yeah.
He left and went to New York. Actually, not too long after this, really. But he and Matt were really good friends, and they would talk about music all the time. And they were always like I wrote some music stuff for the Reader. I didn't do much music, but when I did, I wrote the Beefheart piece, for example,
right.
And other stuff. I never wrote about Frank too much, just a little in passing, But it was really interesting because they would ask me questions about off-the-wall and avant-garde kinds of music that, if they had questions.
Richard and Matt
Richard and Matt would, yeah.
You had a seniority, I mean?
They seem to think so, which I thought was kind of amusing.
Matt did not know you were with Frank.
Right.
You had to keep that from him. He would have freaked, right?
Well, I don't know how he would have taken it.
No, he would have wanted to know.
Well, no, here, let me tell you the story, okay?
Okay.
He was very down on Frank.
Yeah. We have a 1981 article in the Reader he wrote, calling Frank a misogynist.
The following week, I had a talk with him that I wrote a letter to the editor.
After what?
The next week, after that article, that review of the Santa Monica Civic ran, and I took Matt to task. I said, if you don't like something about a specific, about a concert specifically, then tell what you don't like. But to take just like vicious pot shots at somebody that you don't know what the situation is not. It's just not a decent thing to do. And Matt kind of
did they print it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Around. If you looked at the follow, I've got it. I can send you a copy of it. Anyway, I talked to Matt, and the next time I went to the office, the article, the letter ran, and I said, Matt, what is it about Frank that bothers you so much? Because you're not being fair. If you don't like his music, that's fine. You can say
Yeah.
that. It's
Yeah.
not. It's a free country, but the way he did it was really mean-spirited, because it was. It's just
Yeah.
like, "Ugh," you know, stick the knife in, go ahead, you know.
And what-
Everything, because what you've been talking about, of people were burned by Frank. I think Matt felt that without ever having met him.
Right. He felt abandoned.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you,
Yeah.
I can supplement what happened in '77. I know
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
But go on.
Okay, so
how did he respond to that?
Matt said, you know, first he, you know, and then he started thinking about it, and to his credit, he said, you know, you might be right. And then he says, you know, I'd really
Within
like...
the same conversation.
Actually, it took place over a week or two.
Right, an
and I saw
ongoing
him
thing.
again,
And
and I
he
saw
sort
him
of
again.
capitulated at
And
some.
finally he said, do you have Frank's phone number? And I said, yeah. Would you give it to me so I can call him? I think I owe him an apology.
Ooh.
I did. He called up, and then they became friends.
Is that
and the
how-
rest is history. Yeah, he would never have. I mean, at that point in his life, gotten. I think, and it took Frank a while to kind of become friendly with Matt, because
Well, Matt
was
says
still-
he never really started visiting Frank
Till
till
much
89,
later.
90.
Right,
But
right.
he had made a little
But he
contact.
made an initial contact,
Yeah.
and he tried to. And Frank, you know, I think probably at that point was touring a lot too, so he probably
Yeah.
wouldn't have been too encouraging about buddy type
But you
shit.
gave out, I mean, Frank
So
wouldn't
he
like
got-
you giving out numbers.
Well, I thought
But
that
this was relevant.
This was appropriate
Yeah.
because he owed him an apology, and that was the only way he was going to be able to give it to him. He could write him a letter, but it's not the same thing. And I thought it was restitution. And
Yeah.
you know, I wouldn't
Well,
have
he
done
actually did
He
apologize?
called him up and apologized to
Oh,
his
that's
credit.
amazing. And it was
Yeah.
because of you,
Yeah.
who was alienated from Frank, but
Right.
aesthetically knew the standards.
Right. And I thought the whole thing was pretty ironic. But anyway,
Yeah.
so you're going to say what happened in '77?
When I met him, I met him through Urban Gwerder.
Uh-huh.
Urban told
It's a
me,
small world, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, I was in touch, or I can't remember exactly. I know that Urban told me about Matt, or Matt told me about Urban, and
Mhm.
it was a crisscross. So when I came here in '77, I called Matt, and he was
Mhm.
working. He'd just come to LA in
Right
August.
from Seattle.
Yeah,
probably,
August. He'd been at the Evergreen College,
Mhm, right.
and he was working. This is August, and now it's October. He's got the job, the Xerox thing, and he's driving the chauffeur around, or he's
Mhm,
chauffeuring a guy that he's writing his biography for, some old Hollywood guy. You know that story?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that sounds about right.
Yeah, he answered an ad. I want someone to write my story, and the guy would just drive around every night and say, "Well, we did this there, we did that," and Matt was supposed to note
Take
this and
notes,
take notes.
God.
And it didn't
Good
lead
job.
anywhere, I don't think.
Yeah.
So I meet him in 2 months later, and he hates doing that zero. He's a college graduate.
Mhm, right.
I think he was a student president kind of guy.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
was
yeah.
active in the
Yeah.
university. So here, it's part of the depression, I guess. He's now got a degree. He's nothing. He's Xeroxing.
Yeah.
But it was great because he Xeroxed all the Hot Rats Times for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we got together a couple times, and he's the one who told me how to find Don.
Mhm.
Do you remember his friend Phil went off with the residents in San Francisco?
Oh yeah.
What happened to that Phil? Was his name Davis or Davidson?
Phil's, yeah, it was something like that. He came to, now, boy, this is a strange one. He came to Bill Griffith. Bill Griffith knew all the residents, all
Right.
of those guys, and they.
Now, you wouldn't know Phil and Matt until 79, 80.
Right.
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 So this is later.
Right. But this guy Phil, in 1980.
Long black hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 1984, he came to a book signing, Bill Griffith, and I did at Cody's in Berkeley, along with some of the other guys from the residents.
Yeah, and
So,
Phil knew Bill through
He
the
knew-
old residents.
Right. So
Right.
it is a small world.
Yeah,
There's
because,
no two ways
and I was asking Don, Friday night, Don Preston,
Uh-huh.
in '77, Matt turned me on to a guy who, a bootlegging network,
Mhm.
and I went to him, and we went to another place, and the guy made the Cucamonga era singles.
Oh, great.
He took all the 10
Uh-huh.
singles,
Right.
and they made a record. You know,
Well,
grind it
yeah,
out
yeah,
in a
right.
simple
Yeah.
vinyl manufacturer.
Cutting, yeah,
So
direct
Matt gave me that.
Mhm.
Then he told me to go visit Phil, who was involved with Beef Art.
Mhm.
So I go over to Phil's, and when we arrive, Phil answers the phone, or there's a message, and he calls him. And then when he gets off, he said, "Guess who that was?" I said, "No." He said, "That was Don Preston."
Mhm.
I mean, guess who that is? I don't know. Don Preston. And he might come over. I said, "Oh, gee, that'll be great. Meet Don."
Uh-huh.
So then Phil played me the tape of The Fire in
Yeah.
Montreux.
Uh-huh.
They had that on
Yeah.
the bootleg network.
Yeah.
And so then
Oh boy, that was...
then Matt told me, so then Phil said, "I'll give you the number of a guy at a Kentucky Fried Chicken or something in Lancaster, a younger guy who
Mhm.
Don was educating about his black music roots." And so I called that guy, and he told me what the
Don.
name of the mobile place was.
Mhm.
So then I drove out later, and that's how I connected with Don, and I set
Mhm.
up a very good interview with him in Toronto.
Uh-huh.
But while I was there, in October, November, we went to a Zappa concert at the Poly on UCLA, the
Mhm.
Poly Pavilion.
Right, right.
And I think it was Linda Barry was living with him as a friend there.
Mhm.
There was a woman there who we knew from college, and I heard later
Mm-hmm.
that Linda lived with him, or they were friends or
Yeah,
something.
I think they were really good friends. In fact, she,
Does she have black hair?
I think she's a redhead.
Yeah, so see, I'm not sure if it was her.
Yeah,
But
because, yeah, she ordered a copy of Alfred Jarry, the hardcover, which was expensive, the signed limited edition from my publisher when it came. Anyway.
Yeah, she heard about that through Matt, maybe?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know, yeah.
So, did I finish? So, the thing about Phil, that he was he had one of these early computerized music. He was trying to be a musician with this. What do you call those machines?
Like MIDI equipment? Or,
Yeah, MIDI. It was like before
Just
the
different-
chip, I guess.
Pre-MIDI, yeah.
Yeah, pre-chip. Am I right saying it's pre-chip?
Well, yeah, or it's
Or the chip is part of it.
Well, yeah, because MIDI is you run it through a regular computer.
Yeah.
It's not self-contained, but yeah.
So it is a chip factor, but it's really primitive, right?
Yeah, it's chip. You can say memory.
Yeah.
The big,
So he had all these wires, and he was doing that. But he said, "I'm going to go to San Francisco and hang out with the residents."
yeah.
So that's how he met Bill Griffith.
I see.
I guess.
Yeah.
So we go to the concert, and then we come back, and Matt, the two women, who one I thought in retrospect was Linda Barry, and Matt, were mad at Frank. This was the you know, the lather period.
Yeah.
I have I don't know, it wasn't Bobby Brown, but some they were telling me, well, he felt defensive, and he says, you know, my friend Linda, whatever, is Frank's a misogynist, you know, he's a male chauvinist.
Yeah, that was one of Matt's points in his review too.
Right,
yeah.
he's a male chauvinist, and you know, you see that he's a guy from the 50s who doesn't know what's happening. And I always remember looking at him and looking at the girls, and they're younger than me, and I'm saying, there's that political correctness of the women's lib coming up, and the guys have to go along with the women,
exactly.
you know, to have a relationship. I could see that in them, whoever it was.
Yeah.
And I said,
that's a good point. Yeah, because sure. It was Matt probably was being influenced unduly by his
I mean, the women are right, but you know, there's all
they're right, but there's more levels to it.
Yeah, and so I knew that was an immature thing, and I said, we need Frank to remind us of the other thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The dog energy. The male principle needs to be preserved, not obliterated, but yeah, it has to be put in check maybe. So I thought that was a wimpy 70s kid response to that. I said, you guys, you know, dig it. You're not into the energy of Frank.
Yeah.
That was I didn't make a big issue of it, but that was my personal. So I always thought Matt failed on the Zappa test, you know what I mean, because of going to the concert with him. Yeah. And then when I met him in 1980, he was in a very depressed state because he was delivering the stuff, nothing happened. It's just before the cartoon
he hit
thing.
it really big,
And I said, gee, Matt, he really is he's lost, you know, and he had bought me the 10 collectibles, 10 records.
Oh yeah, the old masters.
He had saved them, not the old masters, the bootleg.
Oh, the boots. Yeah.
So he had one for me, so we exchanged it or something. But he was really in a lost state, and I was thinking I was a bit detached from Frank then. In a sense, I'd go in and out. I'd always track Frank, but I wouldn't always like everything.
Yeah.
But generally, I liked something every album.
Yeah.
So I thought that Matt was sort of stuck in the past, hassling, sort of damaged by Frank.
Right.
Because I knew about the damage effect very early via Wally. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the thing. So I knew things about Frank that people didn't know.
Sure.
And so Matt still didn't. Matt still believed in the myth and needed to. So
that's the thing with people. If they buy the myth, which isn't true, of course, they get broken hearted over it. There's all these people on the net that are pissed off about my book because it talks about Frank as he was rather as they think he was.
That's right. And as generations mutate, who knows what these little kids think Frank represents.
This reminds me a little bit of probably what happened with the Bible.
Yeah.
In the sense of the stories were stories, that happened, all right, but the farther and farther away people got, the more garbled they became, you know.
Especially when they get locked down in a manuscript form,
right?
And then they become printed book.
It's and then and you don't argue with it after that because it's canonized. I have a kind of a joking term I use. I call it Zappa orthodoxy, which is people who really have really ironclad ideas about who Frank was and what his art represents, and they aren't going to deviate by golly.
And I learned that from Craig Pincus when he said, well, I had met Frank, but I wasn't a lawyer for him. And Craig said, when I met Frank, I realized I didn't know he was not the person I thought he was. He was totally a different person, you know, than the image he had. So I was lucky to meet people. So, and then I met Beefheart and those guys. But the thing about Matt is that when he was interviewed in that special Zappa issue in 90 or something, he talked about how he wandered from Frank in the early 80s. And we knew exactly
what he meant.
And you were part of it. But I didn't know he apologized.
Yeah.
But then Frank did put out great stuff in the last 80s, you know, which you were appreciating in retrospect. Matt knew enough to appreciate the later stuff, and then he came back to become Frank is my Elvis, you know. But we know there wasn't in there in the middle.
Elvis left the building for a while.
Yeah.
This has been Contemporary Communications Conference. My name is Jerry Fielka. We'd like to thank Nigey Lennon, the author of the book Being Frank, My Time with Frank Zappa, and Bob Dobbs, author of the book Fat at Communion with Bob Dobbs. Thanks a lot.
Well, you're welcome.
Not gonna flush it.
Jerry, we're not finished. I'm not gonna,
That's a good way to
you
end.
got that on tape? No, can we go? I'm not going to end on Matt.
Wait, you got to ask her.
Okay, can you go? Now I want to get into conceptual stuff.
Okay.
Can you handle that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I want to talk music ideas, Frank's ideas. You do maybe it's good. I get time to look up the section. You give a very good description of Frank in general. But yeah, just edit.
Oh, no,
that'll
we
be
can
edited.
edit, yeah.
I don't want to end on talking about Matt.
Matt,
Well,
that might get
No, the
cut.
thing you guys missed about Matt was that at that period, and we have your Nigey, article in the Reader with Don has an illustration,
Right,
and it's
uh-huh.
My Day with Don at
Right,
Denny's.
he's sitting at Denny's.
We got that.
Yeah.
And we got your letter that you wrote to Reader.
Right.
We got all that.
That's all
Okay,
we
good.
got,
Okay,
yeah.
now
We got all that.
the thing is
well,
that
good. I'm glad somebody does.
right. The
Yeah.
thing is that Matt was going to write a book on Frank.
I heard about
And
that.
then when he wrote the article for the Reader, Frank says, "No way."
Yeah.
And then Matt was going, "Well, my second choice was a dead, so I might write a book on that." And then he didn't have any relationship with Frank
From
Yeah.
all through
for
the 80s.
all those years.
Yeah.
He just, I was there when they kissed backed up to the fucking, because Diva watched The Simpsons with Frank, and it was
Right.
the big ritual. So
Right.
then somehow Matt got retouched, but
Yeah.
or reconnected. But
Yeah.
the thing that Frank,
Reinstated.
right, but
yeah.
Frank was pissed that this guy wrote that, and he
Yeah.
says, "No way you're gonna write a book about me."
Yeah.
He
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting though
Good
about that. Frank would get pissed because it is a valid criticism because we said, and that's the interesting about you and him, the
Right.
male-female thing.
Right.
Is and now isn't it amazing that you were
Yeah.
involved in that and you defended the other
You know, I
side.
thought of myself as the devil's advocate.
we're not gonna end
The devil's
there.
advocate.
You thought of
I
it.
was the devil's
yeah.
advocate,
But
definitely. Literally.
the thing
Yeah.
Matt was pointing at was true. Frank was a male chauvinist at a certain
In
level.
a certain sense, sure.
Yeah,
Yes. He was
and-
he was an Italian guy from the 50s.
Yeah,
when he
right.
sagged.
And so Frank would get upset about that little
Sure.
review.
Sure, it was. He took it. But the thing I objected to wasn't what Matt was saying. It was the
Yeah.
way he said it, and the fact that he basically was just taking horrible. It was just insults, really.
Yeah, it was
And
irrelevant.
It was irrelevant because it had nothing to do with Frank
That's
as
right.
a musician or as somebody putting his art out there in public. It had to do with Matt's conception of Frank that had been violated by something.
Right.
And Matt, now if Matt had been really honest, he would.
And I'm telling you what, he got
Right.
violated by. I was there at that concert,
Right,
Polly
exactly.
Pavilion. They were.
My girlfriend thinks Frank Zappa's an asshole.
Yeah, he
now
didn't-
Frank would have appreciated that. if he was honest. you know?
Yeah, he was honest.
Frank was so proud that he broke up so many marriages.
Oh, yeah.
And the other thing, Matt has written about in the L.A. Times about 5 months ago that Matt's working with Gail on some
Oh,
project.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the week after that, in the Reader, they print this review of Baby Snakes because my friend's playing the videotape on Melrose at a cafe.
Oh, really?
And got Gail's permission to play it, but the Reader just yanks their old review, which totally pans
God.
Baby Snakes, and it says Matt Groening at the bottom. And I go, and Matt, and then I talked to Matt about it, and he calls up Gail. I didn't write that, Gail. I didn't write that. That's a mistake. And I was going, you probably wrote it, Matt. He was denying.
That was the time he didn't like Frank, was 79.
That's
I mean,
right.
80, yeah.
Well, and I was there. I saw the concert that blew him out. You know.
There was a guy who
It is
really
hilarious.
took Rip Renz.
Oh,
That's
you know,
why I wanted to ask you guys if because Rip is gone. He's
Bananas,
been with
yeah.
Frank for years, praising him, and then he's
He's gone Andy Frank.
No, he's
Rip
been
Renz.
with Frank's camp for years, and then recently before Frank died, he got really close because Frank would call him up when some musician was visiting, and then he wrote the liner notes to
Yellow Shark,
Yellow
yeah.
Shark.
Well, I sent him a copy of a book because when he was.
Well, because
at
Gene
the- at the-
Veer-
When I was at the Herald.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, he was the main hero guy.
And he
Or
had
one
written,
of
no,
them.
he
used to
wrote a
write
nice
the-
piece
he's-
about me, about
yeah.
Literary LA when it first came out in the Herald, and I just sort of thought I'd send Nigel's book because I've been the PR guy for Nigel's book.
Right.
And I sent it to Rip Renz, and I got back this really strange, snooty note.
Well, but Gene thought you should do it, too.
Yeah, a friend of
Gene
ours.
Veer.
And from Rip that said,
Well, but Nigel had committed some sort of horrendous sin by writing.
I'm under Gail's wing now.
That's what
I cannot approve of anything
That's what
like
he
that.
said.
It was also,
That's what
what
it
it was.
is.
What it was I'd also sent the manuscript of Nigel's book to Daniel Shore because I'd interviewed Shore once.
I've heard about this
Yeah.
because you know who I know is Phyllis Pollock.
Oh,
Oh, you
God.
know
Said
Phyllis.
that I know Phyllis because
Well,
I
Phyllis is the one who was involved
The
with the B'nai B'rith.
PMRC.
Oh
She
yeah,
said-
I know that,
Yeah.
and I know. And then she, when you sent your manuscript to her, she called me up.
I'll bet.
I can't believe this, and I'm going, listen. Anybody who writes anything about Frank, to me, I want to read it. I don't care if
You
it's
like it or
lies
true
or
or not.
horrible or what.
Or whatever
I
it is.
collect Zappa information.
Phyllis couldn't take it.
I called him Gail and I told him.
They were telling you things you didn't know. That
No, I figured that. I figured that
Actually,
scenario.
Nigel figured Phyllis would react
That's
that way.
exactly.
Oh, Phyllis
what
is
she's
like
writing.
so.
So she-
And then the greatest thing about Phyllis is she went from being a rock and roll,
To heavy
Rolling
metal.
Stone metalhead to now she handles all the nastiest black rap there is.
Yeah, right.
You know, the totally.
Yeah.
You know, what she called up Frank once saying, I'm going to commit suicide over this PMRC thing, and Frank said, I'm going out with a movie with my family. You know, he couldn't handle it, which is very rare. Frank never went out.
Yeah.
But we better
He
continue
suddenly had
here.
to go
Well, just
out.
very quickly, so Rip
Yeah.
Van started writing these long...
We had a pen pal for a while. Yeah. He'd fax us every day.
Just they
I
got
kept
more and
all
more
the letters.
bizarre.
About
Oh,
what?
about
book.
about this book.
Yeah,
the book.
about
This
how
is recent.
Yeah.
and about
you
how
want
Nigel
copies
had
of them,
no
I can
right.
send them.
He asked us not to. I don't know.
Yeah.
But how Nigel
Well, don't publish
had
it.
no right to write it, and I said, a person has a right to write about their life. I mean, that's
Something that important, of course. they do, yeah.
I mean, you don't have
If
to
it
get
wasn't important.
permission.
From God.
Yeah, he sort of was acting like she had to get permission from Gail.
Yeah, from the
Here's
estate.
the bottom line. I'll tell
Okay,
you
let me
the
just
reaction
interject
to
here,
that.
Jerry. No, I just tuned out. Was he trying to review your book, or you wouldn't
Yeah.
review it?
He wouldn't
No, we
review
wouldn't
it
review
because
it.
it had sex in it.
Or personal,
He said.
that infected Gail, or family
yeah,
values.
That's what I
you're-
told him. I
And
said,
you're
yeah.
saying he's under Gail's wing. Okay.
Right, and
Yeah,
I'm just
obviously.
saying, myself, who's read at least 8 books on Frank,
Mhm.
and a friend of mine who's a total heavy Zappologist, both agreed it's a good read. And you get to realize who Frank is as a human being, whereas most of the books, including
Don't do that.
himself,
Yeah.
his own book, you don't even really get what's behind it.
Mhm.
And I say, it doesn't even matter if it's all true or not.
Right.
And this
Yeah.
other guy I
Yeah.
knew when I saw you at Book Soup, he
Mhm.
was the one, the doubting guy, and he says, is this book true?
I remember
And I
that
thought
guy.
that was the most
Yeah. He asked me that.
insulting question.
It was hilarious.
Because
Yeah.
you
What can you
know,
say?
I go
No,
to
I
books
made it
that-
all up.
Right.
Well,
you
I
can-
said to Nigel, I said,
accepted
what you have
answer
to
it
tell
that
these
way.
guys is,
But
look,
then-
if I made this whole story up,
I
give
deserve
me a medal for
give me the
brilliant
Pulitzer
fiction.
Prize. Yeah.
Right, and that's
Right.
it.
I
And
mean,
even
something
though
like
it was an
Papillon,
insulting
I
question,
mean, you know,
I thought you handled it well, and I thought it was appropriate for him because he felt he had asked.
People, nothing upsets me unless somebody, like the equivalent of what Matt was doing to Frank. You know, if somebody's just like doesn't give a shit, they're hurting so bad about something that they're
Right.
going to come after me with an axe. Well, I don't want to get hit with an axe for all the wrong reasons.
Have you heard Matt's reaction to the book?
No,
Oh,
Have
that-
you?
No, I don't know.
we didn't send
But
him
but
one.
the other
we were
ultimate
thinking of
is,
trying to get a blurb from him for the back, and then I realized, nah, he's part of the Orthodoxy. He's part of the.
Oh,
Catholic.
he's
That-
under
yeah,
Gail's
the Orthodoxy is the
too.
Gail of
The Gail gang.
But
Frank-
he
the
doesn't-
Church of Orthodox Gail. That's
Yeah.
No, but the other thing is
Yeah.
he sort of wavers because the last time I
Yeah.
talked to him, he doesn't quite get it. But the funniest
doesn't
part
get what?
of being totally under Gail's wing, he doesn't get.
He doesn't
Gail.
understand.
See, once you're under Gail's wing, you just go, oh yeah, and you put up with it. But
Mhm.
he had this weird sort of
Are
thing.
you saying he's perceiving that the Gail dictatorship, or he's not?
He's not under her wing. He knows that Gail's a little off and
Yeah.
whack, but he still doesn't want to fluff the
Yeah,
wings
yeah.
too
You know
Right.
what's
Well, he
really-
doesn't want to screw it up.
Yeah,
Because
he
she's
doesn't
heels
want to
and
string it
words.
up.
What's really strange, Nigel has observed that my dear Uncle Yehudi has a wife who's just like Gail.
She is. Diane
Oh,
Manuel.
that's a
Except she's
syndrome.
much- Except she's much
That's-
more intelligent than
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
called dead composer syndrome. My friend
Yeah,
told me
yeah,
that's
sure.
when the composer died. But the funniest was at Book Soup. I was trying to sneak out because I didn't want to be
Get,
seen
you don't
or
get blood on
anything
your
too much.
hands.
And then that
Put a
guy
blow
goes.
what?
You don't want to get blood on his hands.
And then
All of
Dave,
it.
that my friend who was at the bar, was asked you that question.
Yeah.
Jerry called me over, and then I'm talking to him, and then
Right.
eventually you started there, and it was perfect. We just started talking,
Yeah.
and I says, "Yeah, what kind of birth control did you use?
That was great.
And you go, well, how many books are you reading? And David goes, 3. And he goes, bingo, okay. And then that was in reference to Bob's interview, which we'll give you. And he says, in the middle of this philosophical question, he asked him.
No, Jerry, why don't we read it? Or we'll read it to you.
Yeah.
But on tape?
No, not on tape. Just, would you be able to find it?
No, but it's very simple. He just says, what kind of birth? He's talking about early sexual.
No, I'm asking about his first girlfriends, and he's talking about a girl he had in high school.
Right. Yeah, I remember that from the conversation.
Right. I told her already. She knows. And what kind of birth control you use? And Frank says it's not appropriate to this philosophical.
We had established a philosophical level sort of thing. He says it's not. But what was this one?
I must have thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
He was probably chuckling when he said.
What was it? I asked. I said.
What kind of birth control did you use?
No, I said, did you
did you practice safe sex? No, did you practice safe sex?
And he said...
That's not appropriate.
Yeah, he wouldn't answer. So what happened? You found out, you told me he did use a condom because you demanded it?
No.
She was on...
you were on birth control.
I was taking the pill. He says, well, the first time we ever had sex, he's got a rubber. And I said, what's the overcoat for? He says, well, it's just a policy, it's like I don't know you that well and blah, 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 blah. And, he picked up a pretty good dose of the clap a couple times and didn't want to take it home. I can understand. I said, well, okay, look, I'm clean. I don't have any problems with this, but if we're going to do this, you got to trust me better than that. It's no overcoat or forget it. Yeah. I just didn't give him any choice.
And also you told him you're on the pill.
Yeah. Because, sex with a rubber is forget it. Hand job's better.
Like my one friend says, that's like... eating a tuna sandwich with a wrapping on it, and that was sort of a Zappa-esque type thing to say.
This is I don't know. This maybe should not be on tape. But I was going to ask you when you say to Lionel for not getting upset despite fair cause. Is that in reference to '75? The fact that you're married and you have a little thing with Frank.
Oh, the whole thing with Frank. Lionel's been just wonderfully.
I came to a point.
He gave me an ultimatum. He said, "Frank goes or I go."
Before you got married?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In other words, you...
At the end of my relationship...
Is that a way of saying, will you marry me?
Well, I don't know. What were you... Is that what you were saying?
Well, I was just saying if whatever happens...
if we're going to stay together, Frank goes.
Frank get rid of this guy. And that makes sense.
Was that after the bathroom incident?
Bathroom incident was... We weren't married yet, actually, when the bathroom thing happened.
Oh, it says you were married.
See, Bob, you're blowing all the ones I knew, and you thought you knew.
What do you know?
The one about the bathroom, and I went, meaning coming. Come on.
Okay, no, wait a minute. You were married then.
I might have just gotten married.
Yeah, because Dawn... no, let me just check that.
Well, the B part... I think
isn't that stuff for when it happens, when you just get married?
No, look, you were married. You were married with Dawn because you took your husband up there.
That was but the thing with Frank in the bathroom.
Frank got mad after that.
Yeah, the thing with Frank in the bathroom was after that though.
It was after that.
Yeah, so I was probably.
So you were married.
Yeah.
So the just caught. So you told her.
I told you about it too. I told you about it.
It's big bubbly.
So you had an pretty honest relationship.
Yeah, I told him.
So the thing is that when you said.
It was hardly a surprise.
But it was
he gave the ultimatum was before you got married.
Yeah, basically, and I was trying to tape her off because I kept thinking there was some notions entertained of me actually performing with Frank as late as '74, because I did when he was trying to put on Hunching Toot, Queen of the Universe thing, Drachma Queen of the Universe. It was
Hunching Toot at the what?
It was what was the name of it? It was Hunching Toot something. Hunching Toot and Drachma was just the working title.
No, but you said at the universe.
Yeah, it was. I think it was Drachma Queen of the Universe.
Oh,
was the original
I see
title.
what you're saying.
You might have been in that.
Because I did audition for that vocal spot, and I thought I did okay, and so did the other band members. Frank was kind of upset, and nobody could figure out why.
That you did well. Is that in the book?
Yeah,
sounds familiar. You have that in here.
Yeah.
He was upset.
He's really, really strange about that whole thing. He
Yeah.
lied about the whole. It was obvious. He wanted me to audition.
That was his old dilemma coming back.
Yeah.
Maybe he knew the karma that he got.
Yeah, he didn't want to.
I don't want to do it. I'm not going to get killed again.
That's right.
Yeah, I would have pushed him off.
L.A. journalist kills Frank.
You beat Nina Hagen and Barbra Streisand out.
Yeah, I've heard those.
He wanted.
You told me it was Barbra Streisand. That was right.
Oh, did I tell you?
Yeah.
No, that he wanted. I don't think she was ever.
She would never wanted to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like in the book, I say Bette Midler would have been perfect.
Yeah.
Because it was that kind of a neurotic Jewish.
That's who we always thought would be cast as Gail in the Frank Zappa movie.
Really? I
Bette
didn't know that.
Midler.
You guys thought that?
Ooh, what
Okay.
a nightmare.
Who do you want to play Nigel Lennon?
It's probably somebody who hasn't come up yet, and probably will have one movie to their credit, and that'll be it.
There you go.
All right. No.
For
What?
good reason.
Why is there movie offers?
No.
Yeah.
No. Because the thing is I'd probably get my butt suit off if anything real
Yeah.
started to
Yeah, the Gail should.
Gail's
Army would
just
come
waiting.
out.
Yeah.
Listen, in our world, we like,
Who's our world, Jerry?
well, just
Your world?
whatever. We think
Who's-
if you
who's
get sued by Gail, that means you made it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been hoping she would pull something.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd like to
Oh,
get
did you hear Moon on one of the morning talk shows? They said, have you, the one,
Somebody asked
actually,
her.
you know, that it's the, all the people at LA, the bookstore, Ed Krasnick,
Oh, yeah.
Peter Tilton.
Right, we
Okay,
know,
Peter
yeah.
Tilton
Mhm.
and Tracy had Moon on.
Uh-huh.
I see. It's making more sense.
And they asked her, they said,
Have you
well,
read
what do you
this?
think about the books about Frank? She goes, now this is Gail brainwashing her perfect.
No
Or
doubt.
Moon. She goes, the only book I know about Frank is my dad's book.
Yeah.
It's like, I said to
on.
Bob, I said, Moon, it would be so great for Moon to read your book.
Yeah.
She would get a vision
Yeah,
of her
I
dad,
wondered
and
how-
she probably has, or somebody should give it to her and say, Moon,
Mhm.
this is something you should read. Why not?
I'll give you a copy if you want to give her one.
Oh,
You don't see her
I
right
don't
away.
really see any of them.
Yeah, that guy Ed Krasnick, we talked to him because and he was ho ho ho.
He's
I'm
the
friends
one
of the
who-
family ho ho ho. And I said,
He's the one who interviewed Moon at
Right.
LA the bookstore.
right, and I said, well,
No, what was the issue when you went, what?
Well, we met him actually when the first time I ever went to the store to talk to
Gabriel.
John.
John.
Thank you, about me doing a thing there or whatever. Just checking in because it's kind of a neat place.
And he said, no.
Ed was there. He showed up. I'd never met him in my life before. He says, "Oh yeah, I know the family." And a little red flag went up. And I said, "Well, here, I'll give you a copy of my book. I hope you enjoy it. And do you think the kids might like to read it?"
And that's when he went, So now you're saying that's
Yeah.
explained.
And now it
No,
makes
but
sense,
also
too, because
Gabriel
tried to get me on his radio show.
He does something at KFWB.
Yeah,
and-
he has a regular,
and
the thing that probably the Moon was on. I
Yeah.
think.
And he tried to get you on.
Well, John
Well,
did.
Gabriel tried to get.
And
Nigel
Ed
Lennon.
did not.
Who's
Supposedly-
Gabriel?
Ed,
Yeah,
John
also
is
like
the
Bob
owner of
Sarah.
LA the bookstore. Since he works with Ed Krasnick, who's part of Peter and Tracy's radio show, and he does some radio, then they said, why don't we get Nigel on this radio
Who's
show?
Gabriel?
He
John.
owns
The
the
owner,
Gabriel.
John,
Oh, that's John.
the owner of LA the
Yeah.
bookstore.
So he suggested to somebody
to
to
Kras,
to
he
Krasnick.
tried to get Krasnick to contemplate the idea of having Nigel
Nigel.
on the show, and
Yeah.
I guess he got cold feet.
Right,
Now,
'cause
is that
Ed
before
know-
you
'cause-
had the encounter with Ed where he goes, no, when you offered the book. Is that before that encounter?
After. I think.
That was after.
Because Ed's
John
had-
had already approached him, I think, and I was just trying to, be nice and be friendly.
Yeah.
Because Ed has had Moon at LA the bookstore.
Doing an appearance of some sort.
Appearance.
I see. Okay.
Well, that's what
Every
you're just
Wednesday.
quoting.
Right. Oh, I thought it was a radio thing. I'm sorry.
No, it's a-
It was
No,
live.
Moon was on a radio show with
That's-
Peter and Tracy.
That's when the question was asked.
Right.
Mhm.
Ed is part of that radio
Right,
show, and
and
he
he
had
interviewed-
Moon live in his little show he has every Wednesday there.
At the bookstore.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I see. Yeah, it's funny how influential the Gail is in L.A.
Sure.
I mean, I didn't know it until a few years ago, but she is quite influential, I
Yeah,
guess.
we-
Beverly
we-
D'Angelo,
Yeah.
Well, that
Well,
influential. She's not influential. I don't
Well,
think that's the
control.
right word. You
She has a
use.
control aspect in L.A.
Well, because anybody that needs to do anything having to do with Frank's work at this
Yeah.
point in time's got to go through her.
But you know
And that's
the
what
in
image.
that regard.
No, but here's the thing: the image that Frank is outside the system.
Right.
Maybe it's because of the kids, but his wife is very part of strong control agent within some part of the media system of
Mhm.
Hollywood that people express.
Sure, because
found that out.
I've been finding that. I mean, there are so many people that have such funny ideas about Frank, and where did they come from?
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah.
But
No, but
Yeah, in other
we
words,
found
you-
that out on a number of different occasions.
Just because of his book, so that's
Sure.
that's an
Yeah.
unknown thing that
Yeah.
you're just finding. Yeah, I figured that out a
Yeah.
couple of years ago that something's going on here with
Yeah,
Gail.
yeah. There's
Yeah.
definitely been a control of all
They
information.
actually,
about
despite
Frank.
all her the book's gotten a fair amount of attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it selling well?
Yeah, it's in second printing.
Well, it's not
And
making.
it's not. You know, we're not selling millions of them,
we're
but
still
it moves.
How many
deep in
copies
debt
have you
to our
made?
credit cards.
About 8,000.
And it's the 4,000's gone, and another
Oh yeah,
four's coming.
yeah,
eh?
oh yeah, long gone. In fact,
So
we're going to
at
have
a certain
to
point,
reprint
you'll start getting in the black, right?
We're actually in the black now.
Oh,
We're
that's
already-
And that includes
Technically, no, but for some
worldwide
reason our
sales.
credit cards are
I'm sorry.
That includes worldwide sales.
Well,
We
do
don't
you
have
guys
worldwide.
know? Okay, here's the question. You guys seem to know a lot of things. Where the heck? Who do we contact about international stuff on this book? My website on World Wide Web gets a lot of hits from Europe. We're getting people in Estonia wanting to know about this.
We had a guy who's supposed to be agenting the book.
He's not
just
doing
not
doodling,
doing anything,
yeah.
and I don't.
So you wonder
That's a
how to
hard
get
one,
it
huh?
into Europe.
Yeah.
Whether
You got-
somebody buys translation rights, or I'd prefer that rather than having to ship books.
Yeah,
Because you have to
yeah.
put money up front
Physically, and
that
then
we
you
don't
lose.
really
You can
have.
lose money
Right.
definitely that way.
Oh, I can't have you. Help
Then
you there.
then you got to
Yeah,
get
nobody
them to
does.
pay you after they put it
Right.
out.
Right.
That's
There's a
all.
guy in England, for example, who does does a Zappa.
Commercial doing.
Well, yeah, he ran a review of it, which I.
Oh no, you mean
But,
GNS Music?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, he's the best guy to get to
really,
sell.
because he wants to order some. Yeah,
Good.
And he'll put cash up front. He says, but you know, it might be a couple weeks before we hear from him. But yeah, he'd like.
Oh, I go through GNS. I know.
Jerry,
Spencer.
why don't we give the tape of this thing, and you guys have a supplement? You want to sell that? Is that a part? Is that a way of advertising it? Does that help the book? If you
Yeah,
have
it's
that
not a-
thing?
it's not a bad
wouldn't-
idea.
I wouldn't. I
It'd be
frankly
easy to
wouldn't
do
bother
because you mean
What
like
do you
a
think?
Just say-
transcript of the interview.
No, just if somebody wants to hear a good, you say you
Yeah.
can say we'd recommend this interview if you want to know more than the
Yeah.
book or what's behind
Yeah,
it. But I thought
I'd like
you
to
could
yeah.
offer the tape to people.
No, Spencer
Or-
could sell the 2-tape set
Yeah,
or
let
whatever.
somebody else sell the tape.
Well, yeah, but I mean
Yeah.
that would be great. We
Yeah,
could get
because
paid
it would
for
help
them,
a
yeah.
book, but I don't have any idea how to sell. And Aaron has had no luck selling tapes.
Yeah. No, but I mean, let me think about it. Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
a bad idea because people.
Well,
I
no,
think,
that's the whole
yeah.
thing. It's not an idea of making money off the tapes.
It's-
I'm
It's
just saying, let's
that
make it
piece-
available.
Getting
It's
them
a
out there
supplement, and it
because-
makes them
Yeah.
want to go buy the
It's
book.
gonna, yeah, it's
It
gonna
wouldn't
make
be
people
neat- it
look at
wouldn't-
the book differently.
I wouldn't
But-
know.
It's gonna make people
No,
different.
it'd
look
be
at the
good
book
to have.
differently,
It'd be
and
good
it's-
to have the tapes out there. I can't think of any way to really sell it with.
Not
the
sell
book.
them. Not sell them.
Or-
Just make them available.
Announce that if you want more,
Yeah.
and to the extent that I have a notorious image or name,
Yeah.
they say, "Oh, Bob Dobbs." Yeah, well, we'll see
Yeah.
what Bob said.
Yeah.
But it's turning out we're giving the whole story here.
Yeah.
You know, we're filling
Yeah.
it out.
What are you going to do with the
What?
tapes?
Yeah. What plans do you have?
Well,
We
Jerry wants-
it's just I have this interview series, and when people who are interested in Bob, I make them available, but I try to make them available to radio stations, like when I had a show on KPFK.
Mhm.
Yeah, like I
It
was,
was
on
readily
for
on.
for many years.
You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
David Porter would have played this in a second,
Mhm.
but he doesn't
Got
have a
knocked up.
show anymore.
Yeah.
So
Well, there's-
I don't aggressively go and
Mhm.
seek it. So in other words, for someone to play a 3-hour, which it
Pretty
is
hard.
at this point, David Porter's the only nut in
Who would
radio
do it.
history who would do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I did 2.5 hours with this great filmmaker, and he played it all. In the middle of the interview, the guy yells, "Who in the fuck's ever gonna play this?" And it
We
was
gotta
my
get you
first.
saying this.
And it was my
Who the
first.
fuck gonna play this?
So and then transcribing it's another possibility, but that's not one of my top priorities.
No, I can.
But
imagine.
it's really, I mean, the whole thing was to get you two to just talk because it would be interesting.
Which
Yeah.
we're
So-
doing, which
you know,
is
yeah.
working well.
So we should continue if you guys. 'cause,
Okay,
you know.
there was what were we talking? Did we get everything done in the interim? I just want to refocus here where we were. What was I
Well, you wanted
going
to talk about music.
Yeah, that's what I
The
got the quote. I want to find the.